Okay, good evening. I'd like to call to order the September 16th City Council meeting. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing for the invocation.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Lord, please guide this council and the decisions that are before us this evening. Please join me in a moment of silence for those afflicted by the disaster in Washington. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Huh? No, this is my pen. Okay. This evening we are going to have a presentation from Ron Height, and we're going to move to the Housing Authority, the successor agency, the hospital, and then back to the City Council meeting for those that'll, some of you may be here for a moment or two. Okay, roll call, Denise.
Councilmember Hernandez.
Here.
Councilmember Morrow.
Here.
Councilmember Olson.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Ponce.
Here.
And Mayor Kennedy.
Here.
And for the record, this governing body will hold 3 or 4 separate meetings this evening and will receive no extra compensation.
Okay. Ron Height is here from Southern California.
We have a city manager.
Oh,
You should introduce him.
Ben. Welcome, Ben.
Thank you, Mayor.
Would you like to introduce Ron Height?
Sure. Coming before you now, Mayor and members of the council, is Ron Height, who is the operations manager for Catalina Island for Southern California Edison. Mr. Height has been asked to come forward this evening to provide some details on the desalination plant, specifically as it relates to the safe annual yield. And he's also provided for your review a handout, which he will likely refer to as well. So if you'd like to keep that handy. Thank you, Mr. Height, for being here.
Thank you, City Manager. I had to do that. So, at your request, Council, I came with some real basic, numbers to talk about with the reservoir and the desal plant, water in general. Also provided you the graph that shows a 10-year history of reservoir levels overcharted with rainfall and desal output. But to let you know, as of last Thursday, the reservoir level is at 435 acre-feet. Without the desal plant operating, we forecasted this month, or as of last Thursday, to be at 413 acre-feet. So you can see the impact of the desal plant there. The desal plant provides approximately 15 acre-feet of water per month. So as through the summer as a community or as an island, we've been consuming about 35 acre-feet per month. So you offset that with 15 from the desal plant, you can anticipate a difference of about 20 acre-feet per month. Right now, if we get no rain, which is the worst case scenario, we forecast entering stage 2 rationing, which is 300 acre-feet in March. Without the desal plant operating, we'd be there before Christmas. But as of now, we forecast March if we get no rain. Now, even if we get some rain, you guys probably know by now, right? It takes a while to get the ground saturated. So an inch or two here or there is not going to cut it. We probably won't even see it any impact at all in the reservoir level. It'll take a succession of a number of rainstorms to be able to get the ground saturated, and then one good rain following the saturation point is when we see the increase in the reservoir. But as the mayor pointed out to me a few minutes ago, if you look back on the chart back in January of 2005, even a 6-inch rain in a period of a month could get us full again. Depends on if we can get some saturation just prior to that. Do you have any other questions on that from what I've covered so far? Or any questions at all?
Yeah. How about the desal plant, Ron? I'd like to find out. Is it? Do you guys document how much? Is there a daily log that you keep when it's activated, when it's working? How much is going out? How much is coming in?
Yes.
You do?
Yes.
Would that be public information for us, or is there a way you could get some of that information to us?
Sure.
on paper?
We publish that as it's required from various regulatory agencies, such as the California Department of Public Health and others. So yes, we have that information.
Yeah, it would be nice to see how much, right? It'd be nice to find out when, if it's been broken down or when it breaks down, how much it goes. And in the last couple of years since it's been activated, I'd like to find out.
Well, we took it offline about a year and a half ago because
Correct.
we ran it for 4 solid years. We've got it back. It went through a significant overhaul, both the plant and the wells over at the quarry. We actually got it, we put it back in place before all of the materials were back from being overhauled. So there are some of the blended chromoly or exotic materials that are necessary to keep from that unit from having some corrosion on some of its parts. And we put the unit back together to get it back online before some of those parts were even returned to us. So, and then since it's been on, it's been down a couple of times for a day or two here and there with some failures that the guys have replaced and got it right back up. I noticed today all 4 units are currently running.
Okay. Yeah, we get that information would be great if we can.
Any other questions?
Is a plan to keep it going now,
Yes, absolutely.
24/7?
Yep,
15 acre-feet a month?
yep. Until we get until we get some rain and get the reservoir full.
So 180 acre-feet a year. That about right?
Is that 15 times 12?
Something like that.
Yeah. Now, there's a capacity factor in there. So right now, we're doing 15 acre-feet per month. However, over the period of a year, we have downtime for maintenance. So there's got to be some limits on that. I think the original estimates were closer to 100 acre-feet per year, which could actually be produced,
Yeah,
because you have outages.
yeah.
135 was the original one. Can I talk about rationing and the rationing plan?
Yes.
We are in phase 1. We've been in phase 1 a couple times. It's based upon surface water, but you don't draw surface water. You draw aquifer, right?
That's true. They're hydraulically linked.
Right, but they're not. Have we ever done a study of what the aquifer holds? And have we ever thought about triggering rationing based upon the capacity of the aquifer and how much water is in the aquifer?
Yeah, but it's not easy to measure that water because it's underground. What we can measure is what's hydraulically linked to that. What's visible is the open water reservoir. And according to the experts, it's a reasonable way to do that.
But are there other rationing plans in the state of California? You're not the only utility that has rationing plans.
That's correct.
Are they based on surface water? Or are
They're based on whatever method. They're all different. I don't think I could state that there's probably another small rural water utility that bases their rationing levels on an open water reservoir like we do, because most other small rural water utilities import water. So there's different methods to calculate when they should go in rationing.
It just seems the surface water is kind of arbitrary sometimes because we don't know how much water is in the ground, and that just...
Well, there is a link, and we can see that because of how long it takes for the wells to recover. So as a well that's 80 feet underground brings in the surrounding water, how long it takes for that surrounding area to recharge tells us how much water's in there. And so when the reservoir's down like it is now, we see an impact to that, as opposed to when it's full. So there is a correlation and a link, and the experts have confirmed what was put together many, many years ago, is that's a reasonable way to determine how much water's in that underground aquifer by where we're at on the open water reservoir.
Okay, thanks.
Ron, you previously mentioned that there's another aquifer below the aquifer that we're currently drawing water from. If you were to start the process to tap into that water resource tomorrow, how long would that take?
Approximately 18 months. There's a year's worth of permitting alone on that process. So we're actually looking into that right now. And what it is below what's called the alluvial, which is the soil, the first 60 to 80 feet on the top. You then hit bedrock. And the water we've tapped into is about 350, 400 feet down through the bedrock that flows year-round. And so we've estimated there's a significant amount, approximately 50% of the water we use today available in the bedrock. So we're working with a local developer to go through and revise some cost estimates from a few years ago when we first looked at this, and start that process.
So your intention is to start that process?
Yes.
Because that seems to be a sensible solution to what we face. It seems to be more sensible to do that than run a desal plant.
Yes. That's why we're not looking at adding capacity to the desal plant. The more prudent option is to develop more wells.
Anyone in the audience have any questions for Ron? Come on up, Kevin.
I guess my question is, if the desal plant's been down for a year and a half, it took that long to fix it? I mean, because we're losing 15 acre-feet a month, right? We could have been filling up in order to keep us away from this. Is that not correct, or?
It is. The plant was down longer than anticipated for a number of reasons, but also we attempt, the idea with that plant is to operate it in a manner that's prudent for the ratepayers and to avoid significant episodes of rationing, i.e. phase 2, phase 3. That water costs approximately 5 times as much as the water we get out of the reservoir. So we don't want to run that plant when it's unnecessary. But as I stated before, some of those parts and material, because they're very, very unique to this facility and used nowhere else, some of those parts still aren't here. But we went ahead and put the plant together anyway and got it operational. As we were starting it up, we also went through and had to, which was unforeseen, overhaul the wells associated with that plant. And the decision was made by me to go ahead and overhaul those wells so we could get the full benefit of the desal plant rather than having to run it today at a reduced capacity.
Ron, there's a protocol that's used when there is going to be some substantial building improvement in the community. There's a 47-unit apartment that's going to be discussed tonight. And the normal procedure then was to add more RO modules to the desal plant. Okay, that was what was done. The people that were developing the project Edison would determine how much water that new project would use, and they would have to fund an RO module to make up for the water that this new project is going to use. Is that still the rule?
No.
It
no.
isn't? Oh, okay.
I'm not aware of that process. What I am aware of is what's in the tariffs, which is the process when someone applies for water. We determine how much water there is left in the safe annual yield to give. And if there is sufficient water and we're not in rationing, we provide that water to the project. If we don't have any water left in the safe annual yield and or we're in rationing, they go on a wait list until such time there is. Now, if a project comes along that I can't meet because we're either in rationing or we don't have the safe annual yield to provide, the only other option is for that developer to develop a resource, i.e. the well we just spoke about.
Yeah.
So there are some projects that I have not approved for water because we don't have it in the safe annual yield. They're rather large projects, which is why we're working on developing the well.
Developing another well.
Right.
Yeah.
Which will provide enough water not only for those projects, but a significant amount of water for the rest of the community as well.
Yeah. Yeah, getting in this situation, and there was, as usual, Murphy's Law. Everything fell apart in the RO area, and you had to rebuild it, and we were down for a year and a half. And that's one of the reasons why we're where we are now. And because 100 acre feet of water added to what we've already taken out would not get us in a situation where in March we're going to have to go to phase 2. And that is phase 2 is when we take community showers. Is that what you do then?
Phase 2, there are restrictions on the volume of water per house.
Yeah.
And I think the last time the community went through that was in 91.
Yep.
And prior to that was in 77. So the process hasn't changed all that much from what you probably recall from then. So what that entails, for those that don't know, is yes, you're allotted a certain amount of water per month. I don't recall whether it's based on historical usage or based on occupancy, or maybe a combination of both. And if you exceed that on a month-to-month basis, then there are restrictors put on the water service.
Thanks.
How often do you check the reservoir? Is it once a week or every other week?
Once a week.
Once a week?
Mhm.
And then just to refresh my memory on the second phase, when does that start? Acre feet?
300.
300 acre feet, that's the second stage?
Right.
Okay.
So stage 2 is at 300, and as of last Thursday, we're at 435. So stage 1 was initiated at 600. And so now we're at 435, and so we anticipate, if we get no rain, getting to stage 2 in March. Hopefully we'll have rain in December and January.
So we need to master that rain dance? Is that what you're saying?
We're working on it.
Got to bring those Indians back.
Anyone else have any questions for Ron?
No, stage 2 will start in March if we don't get any rain. No, we have not reached stage 2. We haven't reached stage 2 since 91. Yep.
Ron, there was a question asked to me that has really nothing to do with Avalon. It has to do with Escondido. They do have their own wells out there, right?
The Rancho Escondido has wells for irrigation of the crops. And there was an agreement back in 1962 when Edison took over the utilities that accounted for that, that there was some land ownership retained by the island company, and they have the rights to irrigate those crops using their own methods. Yes.
Great.
That's a benefit really to the community, as it's not taking our drinking water.
Right.
So those will come out of Sweetwater? Are those the ones in Sweetwater?
They're near.
wells.
They're nearer Cottonwood, actually.
Yeah, Cottonwood and Sweetwater down that way.
Yeah, but they're up the hill, closer to the ranch,
Okay,
and that's they're able to irrigate the crops with those wells.
yeah, okay.
Yeah, come on up.
Stage 2 for hotels, if I recall, is based on average occupancy on a month-by-month basis, and then you're allocated so many gallons of water based on that average occupancy. So we'll go through a large informational campaign prior to this starting. So I would suspect sometime in January, if we still haven't gotten rain, we'll be talking to you guys a lot about how this is going to work. Mm-hmm.
Ron, what's the time frame for developing a new well?
Well, the well we're looking at Middle Ranch is approximately 18 months.
18 months.
Yes. There's over a dozen, maybe 15 permits necessary to make that happen.
Is there a way to accelerate the permitting?
It's possible. We can run a number of those concurrent, some we can't. My folks generally are pretty conservative in their estimates,
Yeah.
so there may be ways to speed that up.
Has there been any consideration as to barging water?
Not at this point. If it came to it, absolutely. We do what we have to do.
Any other questions? Thank you, Ron.
Okay. Thanks, Council.
Thanks, Ron.
Okay, let's move to the Housing Authority agenda. Housing Authority? Not yet.
because there is somebody here, I think, who needs to go to work.
Do you need to go to work? Come on up. Come on up.
Well, I'm coming before you again because my request for the citation for parking in the handicap zone was denied. And I fully believe that, that we really weren't completely in the wrong, that there was a very heavy obscurity and overgrowth that personally I think should have been taken care of by the city if they're going to give $330 tickets for it. And I brought back some pictures. And actually, we looked online and did find some information. And I don't know if it pertains to curbs, but the information was that a prominently displayed blue sign saying parking by disabled permit only is required in every state. They must be posted in front of every handicap parking space. I couldn't find anything on curbs, but I had a kind of a fresh picture before and after. Handicap parking only was visible after they chopped down all the grass that was covering it completely. So I thought that might be considered a sign. And I'd really like for you people to review my information and maybe squash this for me, because I really believe in my information. And I hope to believe in you. So I'll leave this here with you.
Sure.
And go on to work, and then maybe you can get a hold of me about it, how you feel about it, what you could do about it. I was told by someone that you might have some pull. All right, thank you. Good luck with the rest of the agenda.
Okay.
Thanks, Kathy.
Thank you. Remind us to talk about that when we get back to the council meeting. How's that sound? Okay. Okay, let's call to order the Housing Authority meeting.
Commissioner Hernandez,
Here.
Commissioner Ponce,
Here.
Commissioner Olson,
Here.
Commissioner Morrow,
Here.
and Chairman Kennedy.
Here. Oral communications. Anyone care to address the Housing Authority for any item that's not currently on our agenda? You may now come forward.
They're flocking.
Consent calendar.
Yes, there's one, action item on the consent calendar tonight, and that is approving the actions from the July 16th and August 20th Housing Authority. It's for your review.
Any member of the audience care to comment on the actions that are before us? Council? Anyone care to entertain a motion then to approve the actions that are before us?
Move
I make a
staff.
motion to approve.
Oh, I'll second then.
Call for a vote, please.
Oh, jeez.
All ayes.
Okay, general business.
Yes, first item under general business pertains to 206 East Whitley and broker requests for proposals. Staff sent out RFPs to sell the property located at 206 East Whitley. 5 proposals were received. We're asking you to take a look at those broker proposals this evening and select a few to interview.
Okay. Anyone in the audience care to comment on this item? Okay. Well, there was certainly one standout in my review of this. And then I do also get a little humor from one of them that kind of recommended that we have somebody else sell it for us. Which I thought was kind of cute. It appears that one of the agents actually has some recommendations to prepare the property, which I think are probably prudent. Has staff taken a look at that at all as to what we think that would cost us?
No, we have not, Mayor.
Okay. Any other comments, council? Any thoughts? Any ideas on direction?
I like the one you're referring to.
So do I.
Did you want a couple, or did you want?
I think probably 2 would be reasonable.
Is there a reason that the first one didn't put a proposed commission?
We asked several times for that, and we did not get any response.
So should we go with Kelly and Elizabeth, since they're both local?
That's what I wrote.
Is that enough direction?
I think that's sufficient. Do we need that made in the motion?
Moved.
Second.
Call for a vote, please.
All ayes.
Okay. Item number 3 under general business is a request for funding contribution to Hamilton Pacific for a very low-income development project. Hamilton Pacific is proposing to build 48 units for individuals and families, qualify as very low income. Along with that request, there is a $3.7 million, there would be a request for $3.7 million of HRA funding. So we're looking for direction tonight regarding this request. I believe that we have Mr. Mike Flynn in attendance also with some background information.
Okay. It's all yours, Mike.
My name is Mike Flynn with Hamilton Pacific, 200 Marte Cortez, Avalon, California. We embarked on this probably about a year and a half ago, looking for a site that would be acceptable to the island company and would work for a low-income housing type project. After reviewing probably 6 or 7 sites around town that had potential, it really came down to this site. All the others were either too expensive and made the projects infeasible, or they had environmental issues, or they had future planning issues that were not conducive to low-income housing being associated with them. What we did at that time was, once we got to that final round, is we brought out a biologist to go out and give us a survey, an environmental survey of the site to find out what we had, because we didn't want to come forth with something and then find out that we couldn't do it. So we did that. We made a survey of the site. There is a wetlands creek, which is basically a runoff creek that runs through the middle. Based on this plan, we've avoided it. They have blessed it, and this does take care of those issues. What you'll see here is there are 6 buildings on the very first page on both sides of that creek area. And on those 6 buildings, the total number of units is 48. The total acreage for the site is 3.25 acres. The actual acreage that's occupied by buildings is just a little bit, around 1 acre. And again, it's located in that road split of Country Club Road and the road that goes off to Falls Canyon. On the second page, you'll see that in the red, what it represents is we did a bit of a feasibility study as to what the property would hold, and then what it would make, what makes sense, what's the critical mass that's necessary in order to have adequate management and have an ongoing operation that could sustain itself. And really the minimum that we came up with was 48 units for the site. These would be split between 3 different product types, there'll be 1 bedroom, a 2 bedroom, and a 3 bedroom, all 16 in number each, for a total of 48. The total estimated cost for the project is $17,586,000. The very next step we had to do is we had to get into an agreement with the island company that indeed they would be willing to offer up that property for this type of use, which we're there. So that brings us to the green box, which is tonight's hearing. Past this, we still have to go through the entitlement process, so we'll have to go through CEQA standards and make sure that we comply. And then after that, once we have an active project ready to go, where we can actually go out and start grading, then we can apply for the 9% tax money that is going to be necessary. There's a $13 million shortfall between what the city has and the actual cost of the project, which we'll go out and retrieve once we have an approved project. All the way to the right, if you look at the funding mechanisms, again, there's roughly about 3.7, 3.8 out of the Housing Authority funds. Because of cash flow, we could actually go out and borrow $2.6 million to cover the actual cash that comes from rents with a safe vacancy factor. You have the low-income tax credits, which is $10,902,000, and then there's a deferred developer that we're not taking up front, which is another $272,000 that will come out of future cash flows. The third page just represents the front elevations of both buildings. There's two different types of buildings. They could either be a little bit larger or a little bit smaller based on the site. So pages 3 and 4 represent that. And then on the last page, we talked about housing credits. Initially, there were some discussions about retrieving and holding on to all 48 housing credits. After discussions with staff, that didn't make sense. It wasn't equitable. The city's putting in or being responsible for putting in 20 or 25% of the cash, then there should be no credits given for that 25%. But if we are responsible for $13 million worth of construction, we should get credit for that. And that's all that that represents. And other than that, I'm here for questions.
Anyone in the audience have any questions for Mike? Discussion, council?
So these are going to be low units.
Yes.
Do we know what the demand in the community is for low units? It's a dumb question.
You know,
I think there's a demand for all units, but that's...
if you don't mind, Mr. Chairman, Housing Authority member Olson, you might recall that back in March of this year, we held a housing strategy workshop. And it was a focused discussion around the fact that, quite frankly, you know, the days of redevelopment are gone in terms of housing money coming in. So you have no more income stream. So the discussion we really had was the fact that you have one-time monies, really. Once this money is spent, you have no more housing money for future housing projects and programs, other than potential loan receivables coming from prior loans that were given out. But those are pretty far and few between. Some of the conversation we did have was about demographics in terms of looking at where the housing need was. There is a pretty broad spread. There's definitely a need for very low income, but there's also a need for low and moderate income. So it's not one or the other per se, but that does go into, quite frankly, the conversation we did have about return on investment. I think the project that's before you is consistent with the thought of, if you're going to put your money into one project, you want to try to get the most bang for your money in terms of not just number of units, but also probably the mix of bedroom types as well as potential mix of incomes. Now, the only other question is the fact that, again, these are one-time monies. So when we talked about next actions from that strategic planning workshop, we did talk about doing a much more in-depth forensic evaluation of different options of where you can spend your money. And remember, these housing bond proceeds are governed by bond covenants. And so certainly an affordable housing project is valid with regard to the expenditure of those monies, but there may be other ways to spend the money as well. That may include rehabilitation of existing housing stock that may be dilapidating, particularly if you have a Section 8 program, which I believe Housing Authority member Morrow was the one that brought that up in terms of one of the projects, the Section 8 voucher program, was going to expire. And so one way to look at extending that program is to actually put money back into that housing project, rehabilitation-wise, and require the extension of that program. So other than that, I know the question of capital improvements related to benefiting affordable housing has also come up. So what I'm trying to say is there's a lot of options. And quite frankly, the intent was to give you more information
so that you have the ability to make an informed decision. We haven't gone through the actual in-depth analysis because, quite frankly, the Housing Authority had no money. You just recreated the Housing Authority. And with the sale of the Descanso and Sumner properties, you now have some cash that you can spend on doing some of this work. So I just want to be able to provide some of that background and also answer your question.
Did you answer?
Yes, the answer is there's a demand for very low, but there's also a demand for low and moderate income. So. What this particular item would do, and the reason we're having this now is because later tonight you will determine whether or not to place this particular item on the ROPS. It needs to be placed on the ROPS if you are going to expend this money. If you decided to look into this, what we're asking you to do is to place on the ROPS an exclusive negotiating agreement, and if Progress has made a development agreement for these funds that would earmark these funds, assuming we were able to conclude a negotiating agreement and conclude a development agreement. You'd have to come back and actually approve the development agreement in a separate action. But in order for us for the agency to spend this money, to have any opportunity to spend this money from the period of January through June of next year, it has to be on the ROPS. So if it is the desire to earmark the funds for this project, we could place the agreement, the negotiating agreement, and if successful, a development agreement on the ROPS, which would lock in those funds for that 6-month period. Now, if you do that, that means that you won't be able to expend the money on other projects, whether it's another larger housing development with perhaps the Island Company, whether it's your own residential rehabilitation program, or we are looking into your housing bond documents to determine if there is a way to use some of the housing funds for some of the infrastructure, i.e. sewer and saltwater. And so these are options that you have. What Mr. Flynn is asking for is to kind of temporarily lock up these funds while we enter into a more concrete development agreement for the use of these funds. So if you want to be able to use those monies at all, you have to put them on the ROPS, and tonight is the night to direct us to do that. If you want to not spend the money and look at more options, then they don't go on the ROPS, and then you cannot spend this money until July 1st of 2014, when the next ROPS come up. With respect to the money that you will be shortly receiving from the sale of Sumner and Descanso, and if you successfully sell the property on Whitley, because those funds have already been expended on low-income housing, when you get the proceeds from those, you don't need to put those proceeds on the ROPS. You can spend that directly without having put them on the ROPS, because they're not directly coming from the bonds, bond proceeds. They're coming from properties that the Housing Authority has title to, and you're able to spend whatever proceeds you get, again, without going through this ROPS procedure. The question tonight is, do you want to allocate these funds for at least from now through June 2014 for this particular project? Okay. During that time, if you do, we would negotiate with Mr. Flynn for we'd have a, first we'd enter right away into an exclusive negotiating agreement, which would just say that we're going to work on a development agreement over the next couple months, and then with the goal to enter into a development agreement that we bring back to you for your approval.
And in that, you can require lots of things, including improvement of infrastructure, right?
Well, we'd ask for that, absolutely. I don't know, I mean, obviously, yes, there's going to be
An impact.
infrastructure, there's going to be impact on the infrastructure that this development will have to take into account, and will have to supply infrastructure to support this development and any downstream impact that this development may have on the city's other infrastructure. They'd have to contribute to that to mitigate the increased use of our infrastructure. That would be part of the development agreement discussions.
And then negotiation with Edison on what has to be done to provide the additional water for 47 units.
That would obviously, that would come in the CEQA process when we're evaluating this project from a CEQA point of view. We'd have to have proof that that water is going to be available.
So this vote would be to give you permission to negotiate a contract with the developer.
Correct. And during that process, the first thing we would do, it would be a two-phase process. The first thing we do is right away we enter into an exclusive negotiating agreement with Mr. Flynn, where during this process he agrees to reimburse the city for the cost of staff cost and attorney cost in negotiating a development agreement. We'd enter into that right away, and then in the next couple months or up until June, we'd try to enter into a development agreement with him that would take into account the use of these funds, infrastructure needs of the city, et cetera, and then go through the entitlement process.
When you start the negotiation, does that lock the money so that these people in Sacramento can't come in and take it away from us again?
That's the purpose of putting it on the ROPS.
Yeah.
However, that would preclude you from other opportunities. I think you need to have that in mind as you consider this.
Yeah, if you lock it up for this project, you're locking it up for anything else you want to do. So
let me ask a question then of Mike. Is a 6-month window of opportunity to work out a development agreement with the city a reasonable thing, being that you're going through the CEQA process? That's question one. You don't have to answer it right away. The other question I have is that based on your funding stream and the way you have this designed, can the projected units and income mix be altered in any way?
Sure.
Okay. And my third question was this, I mentioned the CEQA process. So what's the CEQA process required time-wise?
Well, it depends on what is determined to be the CEQA process. If it's a full EIR or if it's a mitigated neg deck or a neg deck, it's all different. So
My guess is this is
probably a full EIR, but I have to look at the application. Because it's virgin land, it's likely that the regulators are going to require a full EIR, and we also have Coastal Commission too, because this is virgin land.
the reason and rationale I tore into those three questions in the direction I did. I do favor getting bang for the buck and economy of scale and going for one larger project versus another, but I question, kind of along the same lines as Ole, who are we trying to serve here? So the unit design may need to be altered in order to accommodate, I think, the income category of the folks that we're trying to serve. Thirdly, the reality is that if we entered into a 6-month exclusive negotiating agreement with you, I can't see us coming up with some other land deal with the island company in the next 6 months that's going to trump this. And we still have some unknowns as far as infrastructure and things of that nature that is probably going to be at least 6 months for us to get through. So we're not really putting ourselves in harm's way by allocating this money to something that may not happen or will proceed, and we'll know certainly within that 6-month window whether or not we can come up with something else that may trump this, right? In reality?
This just means that if you allocate this money, you cannot, part of it's going to be an exclusive negotiating agreement, which means this money is being set aside for this particular project. And so you can't use it on anything else, even if you want to. Doesn't mean that you actually have to expend it, because you're going to come back with a development agreement.
Right.
But it puts everything else on the shelf during this period where you can't think of anything else. You can't think of anything else to spend it on because you've entered into this agreement with Mr. Flynn.
What's a time frame for a response back on the bond covenant wording interpretation? Do we have a rough estimate as to how long that determination will take?
It's probably 2 to 3 weeks. If I devote the bond people to it right away and we go through all the bond covenants, we can come back in 2 to 3 weeks, maybe, but that doesn't help you because the ROPS period is ending in 2 weeks. And because these are bond covenants and you're making an opinion on whether you can use these bond funds, that has to go through a committee to make an opinion on the use of bond funds, and that takes a sizable amount of time.
And if the development agreement doesn't come out to where to our benefit and our approval, we can reject it, and then the money can become available for something else later on?
Yes,
Okay.
but not until
So we commit the
July
money.
2014.
We commit the money while we're negotiating, and if at the end it comes out that we don't accept it, then we can always say no, and then the money can be used for something else. So we'd be protecting the money during that time.
The money's locked up to a contract, yeah.
You would be protecting the money during that time. You'd be putting it in as close to a lockbox as you can.
Yeah.
There's another thing, though, and we're placing this on the ROPS. Then it goes to the Department of Finance, and they can review it, and they can say that all this is an agreement to agree, and therefore it's not a valid obligation, and they can reject it right away. I mean, they have done that, routinely. They have said an agreement to agree is not a binding obligation. That's what they did with Pedley Beach Road. It was $1 million agreement we had with the island company, but they determined that was just an agreement to do a project in the future, and that's not a valid obligation.
The reason for that was there was not a specific public works contract per se.
Right.
And so the question here, it's a valid one about how is DOF going to respond anyway. The way that we have currently the ROPS written is a little more open-ended, which is why we're seeking direction. Because right now, the ROPS, the one version that includes this money, simply says that it can be used toward an affordable housing project and or related capital improvements, as long as they're consistent with the bond covenants. The way the state reviews these items related to housing bonds is strictly, are they consistent with the covenants, and do you actually have the money that you say you have? How they're going to actually review it, we have no idea, because there's no test case so far.
You'll be the first.
We may be the first, so I think that part of the question we may end up at is, can we continue with that type of general language, which gives you more flexibility during that 6-month time frame, or if we do specifically call out an ENA, is that still just an agreement to get to an agreement?
And our firm had a seminar on Friday, and we discovered that there are 132 lawsuits right now pending with the state of California over the post-redevelopment, and about 100 of those deal specifically with description of projects on ROPS. And the Department of Finance is rejecting them because it's not binding and it's not specific. So, again, what we're saying is, even if you agree to this, we can't guarantee that the state is going to find this a binding obligation.
But
it might.
It's safer than not doing anything
Yes.
and leaving the money hanging out there.
Kevin, you have a question or comment?
I just wanted to finish. You asked a question, Bob. I think that the 6 months, excuse me, is an adequate period of time. Hamilton Pacific has spent money up to this point. We're willing to front the money to get to that point to see if we have a project. We've built a model. So if there needs to be some flexing one way or the other, do something a little bit differently, doing whatever, we're open to that, to sit down and roll up our sleeves and work, with the city to be able to accomplish that. So we're open-ended. If there's a commitment, I don't want to put the money after something that's just maybe someday sort of. We've done that in the past and it's not worked out. So in the future, if we can have specific, complete commitment on both sides for a period of time, let's roll up our sleeves and see what we can get done.
I got a question. The low-income housing tax credit of $10 million, what's the income caps on that?
The income caps. Jeremy, My low-income expert is right here.
Right here.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Jeremy Turner. I'm a consultant on this project, familiar with low-income housing tax credits. With this project and with any tax credit project, there are income bands where a certain percentage of units fit within a certain income level, and those are movable, and the malleability of those determines the end result of the yield on the potential tax credits. And so with this specific project, I'm not 100% familiar with where that 10 million, what bands are associated with that, but it's, you know, it could be anything from 90% of the units at 50% of area and median income and 10% of the units at 40% or below. But those are movable limits that end up determining the end result of the financing. And I don't know if that's what you're asking.
Confused now as I was earlier.
It's a complicated process. The process of applying for, receiving an allocation for, and using low-income housing tax credits, but it works very, very well. Up until the point where you have applied for an allocation and received it, the model that Mike mentioned that we've developed can be changed in any number of ways. Number of units, restrictions on income, on percentages of those units, and every one of those changes ends up changing your yield at the end of the day. So that just, we plug in different numbers to the model, something else comes in at the end. And the way that this is set up right now is, to my understanding, at very low income. So this is probably at 30 and 40 and perhaps 50% of area and median income.
So the model's probably set up for the maximum yield of the tax credits? Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure.
Kevin, you have a comment or a question?
Kevin Striggy, 129 Olive. Yeah, for some of us in the audience and the audience at home, I think it would be interesting if you could explain this process just a little bit more, because as I understand it, we're taking the city's $3.7 million, but we're going to leverage that, and somebody else is going to step up to the plate here and put that other money in. And so I think it's a little maybe misunderstood yet, so if you can talk to that just a little bit, I'd appreciate it, because it's low and mod, is it not? I mean, there's a variable. Low. Okay. And then the other thing is we have RHNA numbers we're going to have to meet one of these days as well, correct? I mean, and so this is going to help us along that. I mean, those numbers are going to be difficult one of these days, I take it, because we're just running out of land and opportunity to do things. So I think leveraging our money is a good deal if we can pull it off. So maybe can you talk to that just a little bit?
To acquire the land, to prep the land and grade it, put in the streets and infrastructure, and do the construction on this project is $17.5 million. The city places $3.7 to $3.8 million, so basically a percentage of that, about 20%. The rest of the money, we go out and we retrieve. So we're responsible for it. The city's not responsible for any of it. What we make the commitment to is we make the commitment to keeping it for 55 years in that low income status, operating it and maintaining it and taking care of the property. Whoever puts up, and it's usually a large institutional play, whether it be Bank of America, Wells Fargo, a large insurance company, someone of that magnitude comes in and actually participates with this. Now, why do they do that? Because they get some tax benefits over a period of time. Whatever the construction monies that they put up, they're able to write off a portion of that over a 10-year period of time. There actually is a board that manages it, and that board stays with the project for 15 years until they exit, because they've gotten everything out of it that they need. And it's important for those folks because they should have those kinds of things on their portfolio. It can't just be all car loans or all housing loans. It has to have some low-income housing applications to it as well. So I hope that answers it. The one other thing, that, you know, and when we were talking about the model that's pretty dynamic is currently there's a number of things working in favor of us in Avalon. And they are this. Normally, when we had redevelopment funds, when you made your application and you went forward with this, there's a huge competition. There's a lot of people that have done this for a long period of time. Most municipalities don't have those monies anymore. So what's happened is that the number of people participating and trying to get these allocations has gone down. Couple that with the fact that interest rates are still at all-time lows. So what that does is that gives us the ability to go out and get more bang for our buck. Those things can change by a point or two, and we could be talking about 38 units instead of 48 units. I mean, it's really that much of a difference. So really the timing and having the ability to move forward and attracting the land, I think we're, you know, in a good position. So.
And also for the people at home, this $3.8 million that the city has can only be used for low-income property. Can't be used for anything else. A lot of people out there thinking, well, why are we putting that money there? We have no choice. It's got to go there. It's directed. Bob?
Any other questions or comments?
Ralph just kind of topped in with that.
Yeah.
Because I know we have those other ones we're selling, right? And possibly selling up on East Whitley and all that too. And all that money goes back into the housing authority, right? Okay.
Well, I don't think that we're hurting ourselves jumping into an exclusive agreement with Hamilton Cove Pacific for 6 months so that we can have staff narrow down the development agreement, get through the CEQA process, determine what all of those things are. I would like us to see us maybe massage some of the units. You know, you see some of the folks that would meet this income category are also college students that come over here and work for the summer. That may be an area where we focus on some of these units being designed for that purpose, just as a thought. And I don't know if it changes your model much, but think of that. Because I do remember when Bird Park Housing was built, there weren't too many families that lived on the island that met that income criteria to actually be able to move in and occupy it. From memory, a few families actually moved here from the mainland that met that criteria in order to acquire that housing, and that would be a shame, not servicing the community that we're trying to serve. But that can be worked through as we get through this development agreement.
I just have a comment on what you just said about students coming over and having some place to live. This housing should be people that actually live here year-round, working. That's who we're trying to accommodate, not a workforce, a temporary workforce coming over here during the summer. If we're going to be spending housing money, then we're going to be spending housing money on people that actually live here, work here year-round. That's okay. Just
going back to what Bob said, when we build it, who qualifies to live in it? I mean, I think we're missing a step here. I think we need to find out what the actual needs and demands are, and the number of families in Avalon that would qualify for these low units.
I'd actually ask if maybe Mr. Lee could speak a little bit on this particular topic, if you don't mind, because there are some other things to consider if you're looking at the palette of availability and what options are. So perhaps you could elaborate on that a little bit?
That was part of our intent in terms of providing further information and analysis, both from a demographic standpoint in terms of really what the community needs are, so that you really are designing a project to meet your community needs, since it is a one-time shot. That's absolutely important, both in terms of location of the project, in terms of proximity to amenities, goods, and services, because you are talking about lower income households. It's also the size of the project, what it'll yield, the income mix. Everything that you're saying is exactly what we wanted to spend some additional time to do. We had hoped to move faster, except that there wasn't funding available. So the question, I believe, that's in front of you is, how do you want to drive this process? Do you want a proposed project to drive the process, or do you want to drive the process in terms of having information first to be able to make an informed decision? So there is the other option of, because the ENA is really still an exploratory process about project feasibility, the 3.7 isn't a sure thing. It's a negotiation, And part of that is looking at what the project is, what's being proposed, what are the income limits, what's actually feasible, what are you willing to actually fund, but it doesn't also limit you from doing other due diligence activities to look at other options for the money. So that was the intent of looking at the ROPS and not trying to just only speak to one particular project, but to leave it a little bit more open-ended.
So, in other words, you could direct staff to come back with a palette of options to you. It's just an option you have.
Yeah, the only question in terms of Mr. Flynn's project is the ENA even sufficient, since it's not a full commitment of money for your competitiveness in terms of the TCAC application process? That's a timing question, obviously. You won't know, and that's the other thing is, there's no sure thing in either case. You can develop the best project proposal, and it's a competitive application process with this committee that sits up in Sacramento. They decide which project gets the actual funding in terms of the tax credits as well.
I might be able to offer just a little illumination here, is that it's not a black box process. It is a point scoring process that is this competitive allocation. And so we put together tax credit applications, and we've done it for dozens of projects over the last 15 years. And there are various elements of this particular project that allow it to score very highly in this process. The availability and the commitment of city funds is one of those elements that will add to the scoring factor of this project and make it very likely to succeed. But in addition, the fact that this qualifies as a rural area, the fact the particular unit mixes that are being offered, there are many, the experience level of the consultants and developers involved. These are all factors that allow us to score highly enough that we can, with some confidence predict a successful application and allocation of tax credits. And to speak also to the idea of investigating further options, this project, as we mentioned, is somewhat changeable in its particulars. And so as we move forward, if there are determinations that are made concurrent to the negotiations of this development contract, such that the particular income levels that are found to be in need of housing in a specific community are different from what we've estimated or anticipated, there are changes that can be made to the project that that end up making it suitable for what the needs end up being, assuming that we haven't accurately anticipated those needs already. It's not that this process or this project would preclude the option of looking at other dynamic factors.
I like the project. I think it's nice. Project, by the way, would be located behind the Catalina Canyon Hotel, up on the hillside, sort of looking down on the cemetery, but it'd be up there. Parking and all that other stuff is there.
Well, and that's the one thing that does concern me about the project is parking. There's 48 more golf carts in town.
And there's the parking area out of town. And it takes 48 families out of this area.
But it brings them into town.
Brings them into
town.
More impact. Mr. Flynn, in the perfect world, everything passes, everything goes well. When would you like to start this project? If everything was perfect.
Everything's perfect. We'd probably be starting this time next year.
This time next year?
If, depending on what happens with the CEQA process. If we have to go through a full-blown EIR, not a focused EIR, I mean, depending on where we end up with it, that's a process all unto itself.
Yeah.
And it's going to take a little while. I mean, I see us and my staff sitting down and working this out and figuring out what works best for the community for where you'd like to place those dollars, where you want to get the biggest bang for your buck. And then that'll go through a little bit of time. We have to do some land planning around it. Depending on what happens with CEQA, then we get out, and then the financing takes place, and we start construction. So, in a perfect world, this time next year. It could be a year and a half. It could be a year and a half from now.
Weather permitting, huh?
Weather
permitting.
I promise you.
That's one thing it does concern me is the time. I know it's kind of thing a little bit, but it's you know, with the drought at the time, getting this time at Edison will dictate that, I guess, down the road, somewhere down the road. But the other thing that kind of gets on me is a little bit the infrastructure with developers not putting money down towards our infrastructure, towards the sewer plant, towards everything. We have a lot of infrastructure problems, and we're adding more people and more usage to that. And I don't know, maybe somewhere along the line, the city will come along and maybe a part of our deal with you is put money down towards those infrastructures, which definitely need upgrading.
Yeah, I mean, it's not uncommon that new development does pay for some of that.
Sure.
And again, it's all within a budget of what we're all trying to achieve. This is a public-private relationship.
Sure, okay.
So, you know, if it's one way or the other, it hurts one way or the other. Right. So we just have to kind of weigh it out and see what you can do with it.
I would just say that it's typically common that new development pays for all infrastructure necessitated by the new development, not part of the infrastructure.
But I haven't seen it in Avalon in a while.
Well,
I haven't seen it in Avalon, and
that's part of the deal that will be discussed in a development agreement.
Okay.
I mean, that's,
We could add that
again,
in.
if the council directs us, that we will first enter into the exclusive negotiating agreement.
I think it's a very
And
important.
then we go forward with the negotiations of the development agreement with the provisions that I need, again, one we need, is it 3.7, which was the original application, or 3.8, which is the pro forma, because it bumped up $100,000 over the weekend.
No, let me explain to you. It didn't bump up over the weekend. It's one of the things that we considered in this pro forma is a clubhouse or a community center located off-site, and we put $100,000 into it for that purpose. We are allowed certain benefits and amenities associated with the project, and if you also look down at the bottom, well, bottom line is that $100,000 is allocated towards that use if we're able to do it.
Okay. That was my question. Okay.
And again, this is not an easy process, and it's going to take some time. It's a big project. I think in the past we've done projects and try to stay out of everybody's hair as best we can. And sometimes we do, but most of the time we have. Taking all those things into consideration on a scale that this project is, I think we've kind of proven ourselves as what we can handle and what we can get done. And I hope, I'd love to sit down and work it with you guys. So.
Okay.
Any other questions for Mike or staff? Direction?
But I'll move what he said.
Ben?
City attorney said?
Yeah.
What I said.
What Ben said?
Looking for a palette of options?
No. I'm all for the project. I'd like to see us commit the money and just go forward. And so it was basically, I like what you said.
Exclusive negotiating.
Exclusive negotiating agreement with for the
With Hamilton
committing
Pacific
of
for
these
6
funds
months.
for, that's 3.7 or 3.8, whatever you direct me to, during that process, that the developer is reimbursing the city for all the costs associated with the negotiating of the development agreement, which is what standard, every city does that, which is what your municipal code provides anyway, and so does your fee schedule. And that during this process, the city would also continue to look at the availability of using housing funds for infrastructure projects or other projects, so that we can come with you when it's time for the future ROPS, and in your consideration of the development agreement, that we also look at other ways to spend money, but for the time being, we're allocating these funds for this project to put them on the ROPS, to do the best we can to lock them up from the state of California, taking the money away.
Exactly.
It's a long motion, but
Anybody want to add to it? Okay, that's my motion.
Second.
Wait.
You have a motion and a second. Any
No, I just,
discussion or additions to
yeah,
that?
I have a discussion. I just have a problem committing this type of money to a project where we can't do anything for 6 months, even discuss something else that might come along, which may be a better use of these funds. So I guess I'm just saying that I'm not going to be voting for it. Yes, we need housing, but this is low income housing. I mean, is that the need that we have in this town? And so we get this built, we do it, we go with it, and have nobody to put in there. So we build a project that we can't put people into because they don't qualify financially?
I think later we'll be discussing Ken going out and doing this little survey to find out what the actual needs are. And if the needs aren't there, there is no need for DDA because there's no need. I think.
But when we put it on the ROPS, can we pull it off the ROPS?
If it goes on the ROPS the way it's worded, it's fairly vague.
So the way it's worded right now, it doesn't speak to this project per se.
Okay.
It says an affordable housing project and or related capital improvements.
But what we're saying is that the more specific you are with putting it on the ROPS, the better chance you are to survive the Department of
The DOF
Finance,
review.
Department of Finance
Correct.
challenge. So if you wanted to, move the percentage higher, that this particular project would withstand scrutiny, you would specifically allocate the name of this project, an E&A for this project for a certain amount of money. And then we would put that on the ROPS. And as I understand it, then during the time, we would have this other money from the Housing Authority that we could direct RSG to look at other options, because we will have, hopefully, if Whitley is sold, another couple $1 million to expend.
However, to answer the Mayor Pro Tem's question, that particular chunk of money would be exclusively committed.
We're going to put it in a lockbox if that's the council's direction, as best we can.
Yeah, and Councilman Ponce, you have to do a litany of studies between now and then, between now and when we get to the end. I mean, marketing studies to find out what housing really is necessary.
Yeah.
You're going to go through all of that. We're going to be obtaining a lot of information.
Right.
Up till now, I would say we've probably spent $50,000 or $60,000 on studies and analysis and all of that kind of stuff. But we have a couple $100,000 to spend just to get information and get smart about this. So that is part of the process.
Yeah.
So, we've got a ways to go, and I don't think anybody really has those answers yet.
And as you get that information, you may learn that this isn't doable
It's
as a
possible.
developer.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
And that would give our staff time to come up with other options in the meantime. While you're working with staff to try to define down this development agreement, staff will be able to spin their wheels and come up with other avenues of spending this money. Because let's remember that Ken informed us a while back that this money's on a time clock in reality, right? We're going to be required to spend it on housing.
These are actually taxable housing bond proceeds, which there is an overall clock, but it's not as quick as if they were tax exempt. Typically, you have 3 years, but in this case, there's a little bit more time to do your due diligence. I think what's important to understand about the exclusive negotiating agreement process, it's a feasibility process, both for them and for you. They're going to propose numbers. You're going to want to review them in terms of both the finances as well as the income mixes, all of the project-related information. At the end of the day, whether it's your consultant or your staff, depending on the review of the project and the financials, the recommendation may be to not proceed with the development agreement as well. Yeah. There is a range of options as well.
And as long as the ROPS continues to be vague, if the project dies and it is available for infrastructure, we're there. Right. Assuming the DOF takes it.
Assuming you want us to proceed with it being as vague as it is.
If you can direct us to leave the description as is, but at the same time enter into that exclusive negotiating agreement with Mr. Flynn, that if it doesn't work out, then we could shift the funds to redevelopment or to infrastructure or other projects.
Right.
that we may decide.
Or one that may not be on the radar at all, and may not be for another year, whatever.
Correct.
Right.
Well, remember, what the procedure is now, you put it on the ROPS, and then you're going to be in March of next year, which is 6 months from now, but still in the middle of this ROPS, you're going to have a new ROPS. And you can remember, this is a 6-month process for the next 3 years, I think.
You would amend your motion?
Yeah.
I'll amend my second.
Amend the motion to include that, and he's amending his second.
I think the motion is to amend it to keep the description as currently proposed on the ROPS with the more open-ended one, but at the same time enter into this negotiating agreement so that when the state asks for backup, we have this agreement ready to go to show them. And then staff will continue to look at other options for these funds during this time.
And I think we would want authorization during the review process with the state, if they push back hard enough and we have to get more specific, whether we would want to get more specific as far as the E&A specific alone.
I'm easy.
It's a back and forth process with the state.
Okay, so we have an amended motion and a second. Any other discussion? We can call for a vote.
Could you repeat that?
Listen to the tape.
Okay, we have 3 ayes, Kennedy, Morrow, Olson, 2 noes, Ponce, and Hernandez.
Item number 4 on the agenda pertains to the down payment assistance program. Housing Authority had placed $500,000 on the last recognized obligation payment schedule, or ROPS, for low and moderate income housing down payment. So we're asking you tonight if you want to continue that program and place it again on the next round of ROPS. We've attached the program guidelines to the agenda here for your review, so we're looking for your direction on that.
Anyone in the audience care to comment on this item? Mike?
On the down payment assistance, we currently did build mitigation housing, and I have purposely kept it vacant so that we could use it for the mitigation housing that was required for our projects. We do have people that are interested in moving forward with it. In Avalon, typically what happens is people work hard, make a reasonable amount of money, but don't have any money in the savings account. So this was one way to allow them to borrow money from the city. If they sell or move in the future, you get that money back. It's a loan, and it's really a public-private relationship with them. We've built the units, they're sitting there, and we'd like to see them used for what they were built for. So,
You say you have 2 families that are qualified, and then you have 2 properties that are waiting.
yeah, what happened was when we did this initially, we had 2 moderate and 2 middle income units in the first phase acquired through the same mechanism that we're talking about tonight. Then what happened is the redevelopment funds were pulled back. All that money was in a quandary for a while. Now what we've had in hopes that this was going to come back, or at least some rendition of it would come back. The last time when the ROPS were applied for, the council entertained moving forward with putting it on the ROPS and making a decision now as to whether or not you open up the down payment assistance program. So there are people that are very interested. I have actually 3 different families right now that have been waiting and hope that they can get into something like this. All good citizens within the city of Avalon, so if there's an opportunity to help them as the program was designed, we'd like to see that happen. So we have, right now on the middle income, we had 2 units that sold since this time without any down payment assistance. So, I mean, that does happen as well. So,
And what staff is recommending is that we keep the program as it was, with one clarification. To the extent that anyone using these funds has pre-existing obligations to provide low-income housing as part of other development agreements, that if you have those pre-existing obligations, or you have obligations under the municipal code for inclusory housing, that if you use the city's funds for the down payment assistance, that that house that you use does not count as an inclusory unit or a low-income unit that you're otherwise obligated to provide, because it's a city-imposed obligation. And then if you're using city money, it's staff's view that you shouldn't get credit for something that the city asked you to do or required you to do that you said you were going to do without the money, and then you're using the city funds for it. So you can still use the money, it's just that you can't use that unit that you're occupying as, say that that was one of the units, the low-income units that you were obligated to provide. And that's where Mr. Flynn and I and staff have a disagreement.
Really?
You know, as hard as it is to get people to fit within the parameters that we already have, no one, and I will tell you, I will never do it again, will build this type of housing if I don't at least get mitigation credits out of it. Because I'm getting, I mean, it requires, they're paying $10 a month in a lease to the island company. There is no development profit in these things. We look at it as an offset against the bigger project. But if you're not even going to get mitigation credits on top of it, why would anybody ever do it? I mean, you wouldn't do it. It's suicide. You'd have a...
But then why should the city have to subsidize for mitigated housing?
Michael, if you remember back when we first started all this, the whole intent was Avalon is by nature, or had been for a number of years, a very transient community. And the idea was to be able to give your stewards for the community the best housing, to make them excited and have roots in the ground to stay here, because there's a lot of people that have left and they get frustrated. They work and work and work and have nothing. So
I totally agree with the argument. But if it's housing that you are required to build anyways, why should the city be using its money to help somebody get into that housing that you have to provide? Because to me, that's a double subsidy on it.
Yeah, and my answer to you is that 80% of it is not your money. And in fact, on the first go-around on the housing down payments, we had some people that you lent $13,000 to, not hundreds of thousands of dollars to, for a $400,000 house that got in because of your $13,000. That's a win in the situation. I don't know of one instance where there was $250,000 given to somebody just as a down payment assistance program. That didn't happen. They need that additional help, and it's helping them. So I mean, your relationship is with them, not with.
And I won't argue that point, but to me, it shouldn't take away the mitigated housing that you shouldn't get credit for providing the inclusionary housing. If we're going to be doing first payment, if we're going to do assistance for them, then it shouldn't be included.
Well, again, my response to that is that if we're looking at who's putting up what percentage of the money, then it would be only fair that if we're putting up, I as the developer, then passing it on to an end user is 80% of the money, then there should be at least an 80% credit. Why would you take all of it? That's in contrary to what we've talked about in the past. And I think the other thing that is a little bit tough for me is that this is kind of now. It's easy if I know ahead of time what I'm trying to strive for, to work for, to get things done and make work. But this is a rule change in the middle of the project after we've held on to them for a while. Now that's my responsibility, and I'm not whining about it. I'm just saying is that at least, in all fairness, if somebody's putting up 80% of the money, they should get 80% of that tax or that housing credit. At least 80%. You shouldn't get 100% because you put up 20. That's not fair.
And as much as I hate to say this, I agree with Mr. Flynn when he talks about the percentage of the housing credit. And I think we should be able to work that out.
I understand. And my issue is this is not a change in the rules. The rules were made back when Mr. Flynn signed a development agreement for Hamilton Cove a decade ago that he would provide inclusory housing. And at that time, there was not a city program to provide a down payment assistance program. We developed that program three years ago, and he did take advantage of that. and for that part, he was given credit. Now the fact is that we're not getting $1 million each year from the state of California for redevelopment. Those funds are gone. These are one-time funds. And so the view of staff is that because he has these pre-existing obligations to provide low and moderate income housing that existed before our down payment assistance program, that he should not be able to take advantage of that program to satisfy obligations.
Right.
That's our view.
And my only comment to that is, we did set up a down payment assistance program. We rolled it over twice. And the rules in that today are different as you're trying to apply it to what they were before. And I understand what you're saying, but I think still, in all fairness, if we're putting up 80% of the money and the city's putting up 20%, at the worst case is you should be sharing it in that percentage rate, because that's your responsibility to the property. We don't get a full credit. And if we did, the ones that I did sell, Michael, that did require any down payment assistance, then I should get full credit for them. The ones that I didn't, then I shouldn't. So,
But just for the argument, had we not done the down payment assistance, those people would not be living there, and those units would still be empty.
well,
So,
we would have
I'm-
gone a different direction and not built them up front. But yes, you're right. They're both four of those.
We
things-
helped them get into one of your
Absolutely.
mitigated units, so
Absolutely.
You know what I really like? Is that you're both right. And I think that doing a percentage based on the skin in the game is the appropriate answer here.
I agree.
Can I speak to it for just a minute?
You
Bob?
can.
And, there's a difference here, because I think if, we kind of all started this game a little different in that we wanted to get people that own their home, okay? And correct me if I'm wrong, but Mike could have went out and bought a fourplex downtown, and provided it qualified as far as the people that were in it. Amanda, correct me if I'm wrong, but
You can't buy it anymore. It's the good old days.
Okay. Well, he could have done the same thing as gone down on a lot down there and put up a box or whatever, and said, okay, we're going to rent it out. It doesn't have to be purchased. It can be rented. And we said, at the time, I remembered the discussion, we really want people to be part of the community and have an ownership in the community. Well, for mitigation housing, you don't go out and build a $400,000 home. You just don't. But yet, you can't go out and build a home that you can sell if it's not going to be at least that, So I guess what I'm saying is, I think when this whole game started, our goal was to get people to own their property, so they had that ownership and pride of ownership. And that's how this whole thing kind of started. I don't think Mike will be building any more low, moderate income units that are like that, but we were trying to come up with a hybrid program here, and that's where we got to where we are today. So I don't think he's trying to pull the wool over anybody's eyes. That's not what's happening here. But we were trying to perform something that is extremely difficult, and that's why it takes participation from everybody's part in order to get somebody. And it doesn't even apply. Triana is not the only one here. We could go to Bahia Vista or Sol Vista or whatever. If you get a $400,000 home, and I don't know where you're going to go around town and get less than a $400,000 home, in order to get a moderate income person in there, we're not going to do it unless we have down payment assistance. So, I think he was just helping step it up a little bit so that we could get people in homes.
Thank you, Kevin.
So, Mike, you've got 2 units that have been finished for how long?
How long have they been finished for? A year and a half.
And been waiting for us to provide the money for assistance for the down payment?
Well, with the
So it's
redo-
costing
yeah.
you how much per month to have that sit there?
The 4 empty units are running about $8,000 or $9,000 a month.
A month.
In carry costs.
So any profit you were ever going to make is gone.
Well, that's the
Way
fallacy of this
gone.
whole thing. There was no profit in it from the get-go. So, no, it's just costing money. So, and again, when you condition Hamilton Cove on its mitigation, you conditioned 4 moderate units, 1 unit to be in Hamilton, and 13 middle-income units. To date, we've sold 2 moderate housing units, so that leaves 2 left. Once that's done, now we move into the middle-income housing bracket, and that's a lot easier. The moderate is so tight as far as what somebody can make and how many kids they can have and what this, there's so many qualifications for it and so much strapping on it that it makes it very difficult to get people to fit into that.
So do we want to keep it, and are these parameters okay?
The only parameter I would change would be the housing credit based upon the percentage of city money involved.
From the sales price. So if the
Yes.
sales price is 400,000 and the city puts in 100,000,
you get
then it
75%
gets
credit.
75% credit.
And actually, to my side, it's kind of shooting yourself in the foot because if you have 1 and then 80% of another, you don't have 2. You have 1 and 80% of another. So you're still going to have to go out and do something with that other one to get a full unit. So, but I think it's a good compromise. And I understand the discussion, and I mean, I think it's valid. So,
I'll make that a motion.
Second.
Call for a vote, please.
All ayes.
Commissioner report.
is does that enable that program to get initiated?
Yes.
Or is that, okay, so people can come in and apply now?
One follow-up on that is that we had RSG supervise and pre-qualify people, and part of the staff report is that they would, you would fund that, fund the process for them to resume what they were doing last time. And again, because we have money coming in from Sumner and Descanso, there are funds available.
And wasn't Mike also paying for those costs?
No, what happens
once
is,
before.
No, he's paying for the cost of the appeal to get this on
To
the
get this on the ROPS. All right.
yeah, no, that we took care of, that we're responsible for. When, I think you're talking about the $150 fee, Scott?
I think so.
To the application cost. To me, the people that are applying should pay that money. I mean, you don't want people making applications that, well, maybe I get it, maybe I don't. You need them to be serious because there's documentation, things that they have to provide. They have to have a little skin in the game as well. So I think them paying that fee is totally fine.
But there are other fees in terms of processing and qualifying there for income and doing that, and I forgot how much it was, but
Previously, both the applicant and at the time, the reloan agency were both funding the eligibility review process.
I think my question and statement was, I think the last time you were here, there was some discussion as to who was going to pay the costs of doing whatever.
That was simply in terms of our time spent, both legal and consulting wise, direct cost to work with DOF to get the 500,000 on the last ROPS the first time around. We don't anticipate those costs this time around, but I suppose if
But the direct answer is that there should be no more monies out of the city's funds from this point forward to initiate the down payment assistance. That should either come from ourselves as a developer or it should come from the applicant making the application and getting approval. Right, Scott, or no?
if you're going to shoulder all those costs.
Well, I don't know maybe you can tell me, I don't know what other costs you're talking about. In the past, we've had an application fee of approximately $150.
There are other costs associated with the processing in terms of determining whether these people are eligible for the program.
Okay. We'll cover those costs.
Okay.
Okay.
Did we establish a maximum for how much we were going to give to each people?
It's 200, it's under the old program, it is,
So we're going to go along with those guidelines.
250. Yeah, it's the old guidelines. The only thing we're changing in the guidelines is the credit for, if you have existing credits, you only get a percentage of a housing unit based upon the city's contribution as opposed to the sales price.
And we're going to update the eligible income limit table?
Yeah, absolutely, yes.
Okay, cool. Commissioner comments?
Commissioner comments?
Ken's not making the boat.
No, you're not. You still got...
I brought a change of clothes, I'm okay.
Okay, let's adjourn the housing meeting.
Now where are we going?
Okay, so I
Successor
believe-
agency.
Yes, we have a couple items on the agenda for the City of Avalon acting as a successor agency to the Avalon Community Improvement Agency. The first item, number 9, City of Avalon Successor Agency Treasurer's Statement of Investment Policy. This is required by law to annually adopt an investment policy, and so we recommend that you adopt the resolution for the fiscal year 2013-2014.
Anyone in the audience care to comment on this item? Okay, counsel?
Move staff.
Yeah, I'll second that.
Okay, call for a vote on item number 9.
All ayes.
Item number 10 relates to discussions we were just having. This is the draft of the Recognized Obligation Payment Schedule, or ROPS, and the budget for January through June 2014. So we're asking you to review and provide direction on this expenditure, and I think we now understand what that is, and maybe Mr. Lee can summarize that for us, and then adopt the resolution putting this ROPS into effect. So maybe if you can summarize, just so we all are straight here, Mr. Lee, on where we stand.
Well, I'm not in a rush to catch a boat anymore. I will keep this brief for your own sake, regardless. So this is really the 5th ROPS since redevelopment died. They changed the nomenclature to 1314B, which is the second half of the fiscal year. Again, DOF changed some of the rules of the game in terms of the template we have to complete. We've been handling that just fine. For the most part, I'll just say that the ROPS is pretty straightforward. There's not a lot of costs that we are having to ask for new property tax revenues for. It's really limited to mostly debt service on our bond payments, as well as administrative costs predominantly. The other items are starting to wind down in terms of prior bond proceeds that were being spent for capital projects, namely the sewer repairs with RBF Consulting, the wastewater treatment plant repairs with Environment Strategy, as well as some limited costs related to Pelly Beach Road improvements. The only thing that has really changed since I last talked to you about the ROPS is we did get what's called our golden ticket. So you might recall we had to do a couple pseudo audits and we had to fork over cash based on those audits, and the state agreed with what we paid. So they've given us what's called a finding of completion. That finding of completion does a couple of things. It opens the doors actually for us to not only spend money for housing bonds, but also non-housing bonds. So now that those other capital projects, the sewer repairs, wastewater treatment plant, et cetera, are starting to wrap up, there is a remaining balance of bond proceeds that are non-housing bond proceeds that can actually be spent for potential capital projects. One project that has been identified is Lower Terrace Road, which I know is a subject of discussion. What we have done in this particular ROPS, and keep in mind, there were 2 versions, depending on the last conversation. Just focus on version 1. Disregard version 2. So version 1 includes the 3.7, 3.8 million for housing or related costs, but it also includes an additional allocation of non-housing bond proceeds for capital improvements. I think what we are recommending is that we also keep that a little bit open-ended, so it's not specific to only one project in case things move, and that is a current version of the ROPS. With that, there's really nothing else spectacular about the ROPS, and we're recommending that you approve the ROPS with potential discussion around how you want to treat the non-housing capital projects. But we're also recommending that you approve a 6-month administrative budget for the successor agency, which is attached.
And the issue there is if the council later tonight, the clearer on the ROPS, the better, obviously. And so if the previous direction was to spend this money on the Lower Terrace Road project, and so if that's still the direction that we can clarify that so that those funds are specifically identified for Lower Terrace Road, which would give us greater probability of sustaining any challenge if the state tried to take that money away or challenge it, that this is not something that is an enforceable obligation. Obviously, if you, again, later tonight affirm the award of the repairs to Pedler Beach Road, we're going to have a obligation on the ROPS that we believe will be defensible if the state would challenge it.
And it's currently the only money that the city's identified for Lower Terrace Road at this point anyway.
Correct.
One other point of clarification, if I can, Mr. Chairman. In terms of the actual dollar amount that's currently listed in version 1 of the ROPS of $683,000, that was an initial estimate. We are continuing to actually determine what the current balance of the bond proceeds are. It's probably actually closer to $1 million, quite frankly. That had a little bit something to do with whether there were going to be any anticipated costs still related to the sewer repairs or wastewater treatment plant repairs. So what we have included in the resolution is authorization for staff to make some technical revisions, including those dollar amounts, once we have secured and determined the actual dollar amount.
Before September 30th.
Actually before next week, because the next step in this process is we got to take this to the oversight board. And once it goes to the oversight board, there's no changes after that.
Can you, just for clarification?
Sure.
Did you just say that it's possible that the amount of money available for the bonds, from the bonds, the golden ticket, is not the $700,000 we thought, but $1 million?
What we currently need to do is we have the estimated balance as of June 30th, 2013. But we have to make sure that all expenses related to that particular date are accurate so that we know really the current balance of the bonds. And potentially it could be $1 million because at the time of June 30th, 2013, the balance was at the time about $1.7 million. There were $600,000 from January through June of 2013. So that takes us through June 30th, 2013. So it could be closer to $1 million, but I don't know if anything else has been spent from July 1 until now. So that's what we're trying to clarify.
We're excited about it.
Yeah, we know. That's why I was kind of like, oh my goodness. Yeah.
Well, so...
It never goes that way, does it?
No, it doesn't.
And let me say, I mean, you could put $700,000 now, and that would leave monies for future projects, but that's probably not the case for this type of project.
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Council, discussion, direction?
Let's go for Middle Terrace, Lower Terrace.
Yeah, what are we going to do? As far as Lower Terrace goes,
Well, we're not
Are we
voting on
approving
this
it?
right now.
No,
but
we're just talking about-
We're just earmarking the money.
yeah,
So we could earmark the money for road infrastructure repair and call it road infrastructure repair, and that would satisfy the state.
I think it'd be best to
To specify?
specify the way it's written right now is the project.
Yeah.
We have it specifically identified as this project.
Yeah.
We use the face page of the contract for this project. What we're asking for as staff is to give staff a little leeway in terms of the sum involved for this project, because we want to make certain that we use those bond funds, that the maximum bond funds that are available.
And I'm sorry, the current version actually is a little bit more generic. My apologies. So we would look for direction to make it more specific to Lower Terrace Road in particular.
I'll move, make it more specific.
Yeah.
Okay.
Second.
Call for vote.
Also make it 1.3 million.
All
Yeah,
ayes.
can you try to get it to 1.3 and then that project's got
That'd be really simple.
I'll try.
Okay, let's move to the hospital board.
You just don't want to be running the meeting anymore.
It's your turn.
Roll call, Denise?
Just drop your name at the airport.
Let's see, what are we doing, hospital?
Hospital board.
Trustee Hernandez.
Here.
Trustee Kennedy.
Present.
Trustee Olson.
Present.
Trustee Morrow.
Here.
Chairman Ponce.
Here. Announcements?
None.
Written communications? None.
None.
Presentations? None. Anyone wishing to speak in regards to the hospital? None. Consent calendar.
Yes, you have two items on your consent calendar this evening. You've got item number 1, Board of Trustees actions from August 20th, recommending that you approve that. And then number 2, the CEO's report and the CFO's report, financial statement dated July 2013, also recommending that you receive and file that.
Anyone wishing to pull anything?
I'll make a motion to approve the trustees' actions and receive and file the CEO's report.
Second.
Call for a vote.
All ayes.
General business? None. Chair's report? None. Members' report?
None?
None. Then we're adjourned.
Okay, before we call the council meeting to order, let's take a couple minute break. People can use the restroom and get another glass of water. Okay, we'll call the council meeting back to order. Let's start at the top of the council agenda. Announcements and communication. You have anything, Ben?
I don't, thank you.
Okay. Oral communications. Anyone in the audience care to address the council for any item that's not on our agenda? You may now come forward.
No.
I just wanted to let everybody know, we have executed the contract on the Catalina Island Museum. If you saw us out there today, they started to take some of the foliage down and landscaping that was there on the site, and we'll be doing the demo on the buildings. And we hope to have a big, beautiful building there for you in June of 2015. So, very excited.
You start grading.
There you go.
Good. Good.
When do you
I
start
have to tell
grading?
you that it was a collaboration between, Michael DeMarche, who worked his tail off on it, and Claude Anthony Marengo and their board, and we did a lot of value engineering to try to make it all cost effective, and we're going to end up with a very, very pretty building when it's all done. So, thank you.
Yeah.
Hey, when do you start grading?
As soon as Amanda gets my
Did-
permit done.
I just want to know when the rain's going to start.
Hey, Mike, did they do anything with the parking, revise anything for parking for that project?
I don't believe so.
They
I
didn't?
don't
So
believe
it's
so, but
pretty much the same.
we're in discussions with some of the neighbors to work some of that out, so we'll see
Okay.
where that all goes.
That seems to be a big issue with that new project.
Yeah, yeah,
I was glad to see it go.
yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
Following Mike. Mayor Bob, you wanted to be reminded just about Kathy Sweet, well, you said as soon as I come back to the council meeting that you wanted to talk a little more about Kathy Sweet, who came in earlier this evening and dropped off some photos. And I just wanted to let you know that I'd seen them. And we've all had the $38 ticket for parking too long in a 1 hour zone. It's a $330 ticket. It's really an expensive ticket for her. And where she parked, if you look in the envelope that was provided, you'll see 2 pictures. One picture of the night that she parked there, where the blue curb is grown over with ivy and there's no street sign, so you couldn't read the curb. And I guess that's her point, and she wanted to make sure that you understood that. The second picture you'll see is after she contested her ticket, either because of that or coincidentally at the same time, then the ivy was cut, and now the curb is blue and not overgrown with growth. So at nighttime with the curb overgrown with ivy, it's impossible to know that that's a handicap zone, and she's just asking that the council people take a look at both pictures so that you can see when they parked there with the ivy, it was impossible to know that it was a handicap zone, and maybe a little courtesy could be displayed for her. Thank you, sir.
As the newbie here, could I ask a question? What is the appeal process as stipulated by the parking citation hearing? It sounds like we've conducted a hearing. Is there an appeal process?
I believe the appeal process is to come to council, correct?
Is it an
And there is an appeal
agendized
fee,
item?
though, of I don't have the fee schedule in front of me.
Okay, but there is a remedy available for people that wish to contest a decision, and that is set forth and that is available to them, correct?
Council or the vehicle hearing officer, is that correct, Scott? There we go to?
And we can certainly look at it, but I believe that my point being that there is a specific process that this goes through so that you're not in a position where you're being actively lobbied on something that you're not prepared for.
Nor on the agenda.
Correct.
Right, nor is it on the agenda.
Right.
But I feel
And I
it'll,
think there's appeal fee, too.
but personally, I feel it a little bit odd that the ticket didn't get taken care of already anyway.
No. The direction was at the last meeting
To meet.
for the council, to go back with the new information. And apparently it was, and the result was the exact same. So now the appropriate thing for her to do is to appeal it
To appeal it to
to
the
the
city
appropriate
council.
body, and then that matter will be heard.
So we can notify her that that's the process? Do
Yes,
we have
sir.
the ability to notify her? Okay,
Yes, we do.
perfect.
It's on the ticket.
I'm not sure that a $150 fee for a $300 appeal makes a lot of sense.
I don't know what the fee is.
Hi, Karen Haig, 342 Descanso. I just have been thinking about it a lot, and I haven't said anything yet because I forget when I get here, but yay, the pigeons are like so not here anymore. What a great decision you guys made, and it's cool. I just want to say thanks. Pigeons, you know, they're mostly gone.
We had pigeons.
Oh, you can eat at Coney Island, and there's not a pigeon to be seen. It's amazing. And Pete's, they used to just... So anyway, that was it.
Thank you, Karen.
Oh, here comes Jen.
Uh-oh.
I wanted to just remind the community that we have Fall Fest coming up on October 17th. That's a Thursday evening, and we are currently taking applications at City Hall for any organizations, community groups, or businesses that would like to have a booth. That's for any game booths or information booths or any food booths. And the food booths are limited, so if anyone is planning on holding a food booth, they should come in immediately and get on the list. And all the applications are available here at City Hall, as well as online at cityofavalon.com. And there's also a how-to here in City Hall and online if you're planning on having a food booth, to break it down on what the requirements are and what form you need to fill out and what to do with it once you fill it out. So we'll see everyone then.
Are you counting hours yet?
Yes.
Not a girl.
24.
24. All right.
Till we leave.
There you go. Okay, anyone else? Okay, consent calendar, Ben.
Yes, you have 5 items on your consent calendar this evening. Actions to approve from the September 3rd City Council meeting. Warrants in the amount of $174,228. Expenditure warrants 473,007, payroll 194,660, tax expenditures of 667,668. The contract between the City of Avalon and Catalina Channel Express for the subsidized rates on commuter books, and then the Treasurer's Statement of Investment Policy for 2013-14. All these are on your consent calendar this evening.
I need to amend two things. We're removing number 1 for lack of actions. And number 4 on the contract that you had, it was pointed out to me this morning by the Express. On 1B of your contract, it says $85 per adult book. It's $70, so it's 70 and 70 for adult and child. And then on the next page in the D section, a little change in wording it. So it's the Catalina Express shall add a service charge of 2% of the cost of the commuter book to the total. The wording had to be changed a little.
Okay. All right, so for items 2 through 5 on the consent calendar, any member of the audience care to comment on those items? Any member of the council wish to pull an item for further discussion? Anyone care to entertain a motion then for items 2 through 5?
I make a motion to approve items 2 through 5.
Second.
Call for a vote, please.
All ayes.
General business?
Yes, on general business tonight, item number 6 pertains to the Hermosa Hotel Catalina Beach House and a request to amend a transportation permit. They are approaching council to request an amendment to their permit to allow the shuttling of guests to all points of interest and not just those in the transportation hubs. We're asking that you discuss this and you provide us with direction. The staff's recommendation is to deny the request since we have not received facts supporting the findings set forth in the code that would allow for such an amendment. I should also tell you we've received an email from Ann Muscat, the CEO of the Catalina Conservancy. And if you'd indulge me for a moment, I'll just briefly read this.
If we could, although...
Yes, I was waiting for him to finish.
Okay.
But I have to recuse myself because I live across the street.
Pardon me. Thank you, council member. So briefly, dear Avalon City Council members, it was brought to our attention that the Hermosa Hotel and Catalina Beach House are attempting to modify their transportation permit to include routes that go up Avalon Canyon past the Conservancy's Nature Center and Wrigley Memorial Botanical Garden. During the winter months, especially, visitors to the island often choose not to travel up the canyon to these educational destinations for various reasons, such as weather, costs, mobility issues, etc. In addition, the first-time traveler is never really sure which way to go and how far or long the journey will be. We are supportive of efforts to improve transportation up Avalon Canyon and would ask that you consider the potential merits of this request. Thank you, Ann Muscat, CEO of Catalina Island Conservancy. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Mark?
Thank you, Councilman, Mayor, Bob. Yes, what we wanted to do is just modify this transportation permit. I went to the office and said, how do you do this? And they said, write a letter. It was before the form came out the day before. So I'd like to tell you, it'd be easier if I read my letter. It was to Mr. Moran. We respectfully submit the following change to our transportation permit so that it mirrors the permits issued to other hotels and service providers. As advised by your counterstaff, we are making this request in writing. In no way are we interested in providing services that conflict with or makes direct competition to or with the taxi company. In fact, we order several taxis a week, sometimes several a day, I should say, for our guests and support their great level of service that the taxi company operates with, even though we have our own courtesy carts. However, we were recently rejected by a scuba tour operator. Our hotels were rejected the opportunity to bid on their seasonal work, that is, because we don't drop off at the dive point like the Seaport Village does. We have no intention of providing a drop-off and pick-up service, but would like the option to provide service when we can, especially to those who need extra mobility assistance. To that end, we would like to drop off guests at the Wrigley Memorial and Botanic Garden. They can walk back, they can take a taxi, they can do whatever they want. The trolley will soon be eliminating 70% of its service with the changing of the seasons. We would like to drop off people at the casino, both for the museum and for the dive park, so that we can directly source the guests to the museum and, of course, the dive park. The museum's growth in attendance is important, and we are invested in their success as they build next to the Hermosa Hotel. Of course, we want to make sure that we are not out of our permitted routes when we take guests to the heliport for air tours and transportation. I bet currently our permit doesn't really let us take guests past the mole to the helicopter. So the overall language we request is most similar to the Seaport Village. Quote, permission to pick up and drop off customers from transportation sites such as the mole and helicopter, and also transport guests to points of interest. That's the exact quote from their transportation permit as provided by the city. Again, this is being requested in writing as directed by the counter staff last week, actually 2 weeks ago now, 3. They queried the city manager for precise directions and advice. Please call with any questions or advice. So my point is, we want to be able to do what the other hotels can do. Seaport Village has scuba divers, not as many as we do, but they do have scuba divers, and Mindy is in charge of our group sales, and she's getting blown out in these people who demand to be dropped off at the casino, and we can't offer that. A transportation hub that we should be allowed to go to, I would think, would be the heliport. Since we're allowed to go to the mole, why wouldn't we be allowed to take people to the heliport that the other hotels get to? So we're just looking for some parity to be similar to the other hotels, and that's why we asked. We thought, geez, if we could take people to the dive park, if we could drop them off at the heliport, whether that's for pickup or delivery, or sometimes our guests even do the tours, you know, 20, 30-minute tours. And then the other thing is, especially during the winter, if we could throw people down the canyon so that they would go to the botanical gardens, and so maybe on the way back they could walk and see the nature center, that it would be a great benefit to our guests, of course to the hotel, but to our guests, and we're not asking for anything that's out of line. I was disappointed with the staff report on this. First off, the staff report says that our existing route, if I go into the second paragraph of report summary, the last sentence, the route was limited, talking about our hotel's routes, in the same manner as other hotels. No, it's not. And that's why I'm here to ask that we're allowed to go to the heliport and that we're allowed to go to the dive park, as well as the museum at the casino. Then the report went on to talk about public transportation. We're providing a guest courtesy. We are not doing public transportation, nor are we charging. I know some people would say, oh, is it built into your room, therefore you are charging. The bottom line is we're not charging. It actually costs us to provide this service. And so we're really not public transportation. All we want to do is drop off our guests in a couple specific points so that they might better enjoy the island, and we do this at our own cost. There is no damage to anyone else for doing it. Point 5, if I go to section B of this permits application from the staff report, page 2, number 5 says there is no more suitable alternative vehicle than the vehicles requested by the applicant that can satisfy its requirements. It's real simple to see that our little limo cart has been in operation for over a year here on the island. It doesn't cause any problems. It does provide a great level of service, and that's one of the things that we really want to do, is expand the route so that we can legally go to the heliport, so that we can go to the dive park and be like the other hotels that service scuba divers, which is a great source of revenue for the city. There isn't alternative transportation. Oh, you could say they could hire a taxi, the couple's not going to hire a taxi to go to the Botanical Gardens, whereas the golf carts listed by the staff in the report, nobody takes the golf carts at 75 cents a minute and parks it outside the Botanic Gardens to walk for 2 hours or an hour, because the cost of doing that would be $40 or $60. They can't enjoy themselves in the gardens if that meter is clicking. So the golf cart isn't available. The shuttle, which I guess would mean the trolley, will not be working midweek anymore during the winter season. So it is a problem getting people up there. We just want to be like the Seaport and be able to take people to the dive point, the casino point, and to the museum. We would like to legally take people to the helicopter because it is a transportation hub, and that's why we have the cart. And certainly, it just makes a lot of sense to support the Island Conservancy and the Botanic Gardens to get people up there. Again, we're not running to pickup. We're not doing the pickup delivery service. That's not our goal. Our goal is just to get them up there, and they'll find their own way back. But if you're new to the island, especially during winter, especially when it's colder, especially when it's darker early, you don't know how far that walk is and how much it's going to be. So we just like the idea of providing this service for people, and I ask that you extend our route to those 3 points, and that's why I'm here this evening.
If I could, just a point of importance clarification. In the request received, the change that is requested for the current transportation permit reads as follows: to include all paved roads in City of Avalon. Now, what you have laid out in your request now differs significantly from this written request. I think that is very important, and if your request is something different than this, then that's how it should be submitted.
I understand what you're saying, Ben, and actually the letter that I wrote was submitted 2 weeks before that report, that page was sent to me and said, well, put that here. So it was already requested in writing and was mailed to Dudley, and that's when he sent the form back. Now, when I think, how do you get to the heliport? Of course you want to ride on Pebbly. But on a rain day, you've got to come over the hump by Mount Ada. You have to on a rain day because the fence is going to be closed.
If I could, just please, just I think the reason why the form's important, for a couple of reasons. We have to have requests go through a process where it's the same for everyone. With a letter, I understand what you're saying. Hold on. A letter, you can explain your position, but this is the same, it's straightforward for everybody. You specify what you're asking for. We have a uniform method of gathering information, and so I think the discussion should be, let's make sure we have the request as it is.
Ben, and I understand what you're saying, and this is the problem with that. I specifically walked to City Hall and I said, how do I do this? They didn't say, here's a form. They said, please write us a letter. Okay. I went to counterstaff. Counterstaff went to back office. I was directed to do it in the first way, the way of the letter. Now, if you want to write notes on that, it would be unfair, I think, to say, oh, go write it differently on the form now and come back in another 2 weeks or 4 weeks and wait 3 hours for us to talk to you about it. That's not fair. Okay, what would be fair is to say, look at the letter he wrote. This is what he was told to do. And then after he wrote the letter, he didn't get the hearing the last meeting because all of a sudden everybody decided they wanted the form. And I started thinking of the form. On a rain day, you got to come over Mount Ada. So you got to be allowed to go on that road or you might lose your permit. The canyon is paved, okay? Out to Dive Park. There are no other roads in Avalon that we would travel. We've covered all the roads. So when I say asphalt roads, it's actually expanding the letter, and the letter's point is we'd like to go to point A, point B, and point C. And I had no intention to fighting about the form, Ben. What my situation was is I was told to write a letter, I wrote the letter, and then I got sent the form to fill out, which I filled it out, and in reality, what street would I not write on?
Well, okay, a couple things. So number one, I want to apologize if there was any confusion on our end. That's certainly not our goal here, so that's the first thing. So I apologize for that. But number two, we need probably something more specific. I mean, it sounds like I'm still not entirely clear on the request based on what you're saying.
Okay, so listen. One would be the heliport, one would be the casino, and one would be the Botanic Gardens. Those 3 points, those are the only points I want to go to.
Okay. Okay.
Can I comment on a couple things, please?
Yeah.
I want to apologize to Mark also if you were given the wrong information, but if somebody comes to the counter, if it's somebody that's dealing all the time with vehicles, you would be told to fill out a transportation permit to amend it. So I apologize for any misinformation you were given. I have not seen that letter, otherwise I would have included your other things. But you did state in your permit that all points of interest in the city, which could be the Chimes, which could be the point above the casino, which could be Three Palms, it could be Buena Vista Point. So, but now you've clarified specifically some other points. And then I would like to ask for clarification. In your transportation permit that you currently have, it says transportation point hubs, doesn't it?
I believe it says the
We always
mole.
include the boats and the helicopter. So I would need to clarify that that does not say that.
If we don't need to clarify it, if you say I'm allowed to go to the heliport, I'm good with that. I'm good with that. They would stipulate
If
to
it's to
that,
take
and I can
people
take
to
that
fly,
out of this
yes.
request tonight since I'm already allowed to do it. So that would be fine.
Because we've never given a transportation permit to the hotels and not to include the helicopter.
Okay.
Now Dudley's in the back, and I'm sure he could come out and clarify anything if he knows off the top of his head, but
I was just told the boats and the hotels. I didn't know that I was allowed to do the helicopter.
it should have been in the letter that he receives, kind of specifying.
Sure.
Hi, Vehicle Clerk Dudley Moran. I think maybe what happened when Mark came through with the heliport, we normally say the transportation hubs, but at that time the Pebbley Beach Road was closed. And your vehicle wasn't legal to be on that road. So that's probably
Okay.
where the confusion
Clarifies
was
that.
there.
Okay.
So then that might be correct to ask for it officially, even though now it's kind of like grandfathered.
So the request is for the 3 points: gardens, transportation hubs, and
Wants to amend his existing to
Amend.
add the gardens and casino.
right.
No problem with that.
I have no problem doing casino. As you said, no one will spend $40 to go up to the Botanical Gardens to walk around the gardens for a couple of hours. They will spend $40 to $80 to sit at Mount Ada and have lunch when they rental golf cart sitting in the parking lot. So I'll give you the casino, but I won't give you the Botanical Gardens.
Casino.
We have
Casino.
casino.
Casino. But, Catalina Transportation, do you have anything to say about that? Do you have any input for us?
Come
I
up
would
to
like,
the podium.
I would like to hear from the taxi company, what their thoughts are. Okay.
Connie Stewart, 340 Descanso. I was under the impression that the Island Company, their transportation permit actually allows their shuttle, which I thought was approved by Dudley, to have this transportation permit to go to Descanso, to the gardens, and I believe it's down Catalina Street or something. And I was pretty sure that that already allowed them to do that, and that they are in the process of beginning that shuttle route. So there already would be a shuttle that goes, and as far as I can see, they run daily. And it's a free shuttle. And they run, and I see them stop at the casino, even though they're not supposed to stop at the casino, they do it all the time. So they go to the casino, to Descanso Beach, and I was already under the impression they were going to be going to the Botanical Gardens. So if that's the case, to me, to allow one hotel to do that, and I love you, I think you're a great guy, this is business. I think to allow one hotel to do that means you're then going to allow every single hotel to come in here, when you've already allowed a shuttle now that is a free shuttle for people to take, to do this route. And to me, if that shuttle's allowed to do it, then they should do it. And I don't believe we should have every hotel shuttle running around to every interest point. And if you allow one, you're gonna have to allow every single one.
And on that point, as a person who drives a shuttle, and people who come to have meal services at the inn, we're very specific with them and telling them that no, our hotel shuttle is for overnight guests pickup only. We are not allowed to transport anyone else other than our overnight guests back and forth. And it's from the inn to the boat to the heliport. And if they're stopping somewhere else in town, they're going somewhere from us, we're going to take them to the next hotel and drop them at the hotel. But we're very specific in that. No, we just don't transport everybody. It's just the overnight guests, and it's 2 specific locations, boat, heliport, and if they're going to go stay in another hotel, to that hotel.
Yeah, because I honestly do believe this would just be the tipping point of it all. I mean, I think, yeah, the heliport and the boat, that's just a given.
And then the other thing is with guests who don't want to drive the golf cart, we give them taxi vouchers. We pay for their taxi ride. So it's
A lot of hotels do that. They actually offer that. Or they give them the voucher and they give them the choice on how to use the voucher as well. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I do want to point out that the Island Company's tram, that's not a new thing. That was something they had like banked and they revitalized it. Dudley could speak more on their exact route because I'm not familiar with it.
Yeah, Dudley, would
wanted
you
to
mind
know.
commenting on their route?
Just so you're clear.
Well, yeah, since it's been brought up, we probably ought to.
Didn't the Conservancy come to us about having a shuttle that they could do during the winter to take people up to? It was like a.
Ask the vehicle clerk.
Give him a second, then you can go back to your question.
The Island Company back in the 80s, they had the little minibuses, and they had shelved those for a number of years that they just brought back and requested the same routes. We've gone through the legal department to see if everything was in line to do that, and everything seemed proper, so we let them reinstate that.
Is the Memorial Gardens on their new route?
It is. They have not utilized it yet, but we've been approved for it.
Okay.
What they're looking at is something in the same vein as what Mark has as far as vehicles, so that they're not driving that great big minibus around. That's at least what they've told us. So they're looking for something in a little smaller package.
So would you please outline their route, Dudley?
Off the top of my, they can go to the casino. That's one of their properties. They can go to Descanso Beach Club, and they can go to
Country Club?
I'd have to look at the paperwork. I think eventually the Country Club, but I know the Botanical Gardens is part of it.
Okay.
Good.
Thank you, Dudley. All right, back to your comment then, Michael. You were making a comment?
Oh, I thought the Conservancy had come to us like a year ago, and they had looked at having a service that they could get
It's not
from
really-
the plaza up to the Botanical Gardens.
Did it come before council?
I thought it had, but
I
I
think that
they
they had,
actually advertise on the back of our trolley signs or something like that, yeah.
yeah,
Like
I
gave
think
them
that they
for
mentioned
free.
when the trolley kind of goes away in the winter, they planned on backfilling it with one of their
That's-
buses,
that's what I was-
if I remember
And they're-
correctly.
The signs are on the back of our trolley signs all around town. So that was my solution to help them out so they could get people there. I just have to say this because I don't understand the transportation permit that was banked from mid-'90s. I have to fill mine out every year. They're sitting on my desk now to send to Dudley. And so I'm a little distressed that I didn't have any input, or there wasn't any input, even at the city council level, I think, to re-upping that.
It went before the vehicle hearing officer, and that was published in the paper, so there was a notice that went out.
Okay, well, anyway, it was distressing. So I agree with Con about what we're saying about the slippery slope here. If you want a valid taxi company, we're working real hard. You know, we try to do a good job, but if you want a different kind of transportation system in the city, then you just need to give us a chance to sell it real quick and get out from under, and then you can just beat the hell out of my taxi company, okay? Oh, then it would be mine. But I'm just saying, you know, you have to look at the whole picture, and what is it that you want? And obviously, we want our customers taken care of. That is absolutely the most important thing. They're the ones that pay for us to live here, for heaven's sakes, and for everybody to make a nice living and, you know, live next to the ocean and great weather all the time. But there's also a community spirit, I think, and if you want, you need to take a look at your whole idea of transportation and how you want the city to look, you know, 2020 vision and stuff, what you have there. So, thank you.
Thank you, Karen.
this is a forward progress here, and I appreciate the efforts tonight. Having the heliport is awesome, and I appreciate that to the entire council. Thank you. The dive park, if you could bifurcate my request so that we could vote independently on dive park and botanic gardens. I'm in old school there. This is what I would say. If we had the right to do the botanic gardens, if the trolley was running on the weekend, or if the island company was running their shuttle, then our route would not be allowed to us. But if there's a time during the season that the island company's not doing the work midweek and the trolley isn't working, and then we're at no competition or threat or doubling of traffic, I would ask that there be, if you would please, to make a second motion that says when no one else is doing the job, can the Hermosa take their guests, Hermosa Beach House guests, to the gardens. And again, we won't, again, with this permission, we would not do any pickups there. It would just be a drop-off so that they can enjoy the place. And I would request that we bifurcate the request this evening.
Thank you, Mark. Okay,
Who would be the police for that? Who would be the police?
I did just want to say that we do actually get quite a few taxi requests that go to the gardens. And they go from all over this island to go to the gardens, including your hotel. They actually do, because I know I dispatch. They do. There's a lot of people. And to me, having something that is in his transportation permit that allows him to do it if we're not running, or if that's just such a thing where pretty much you could kind of say, well, that wasn't happening that day, and there's kind of no proof of that. I mean, I see shuttles all the time, and I deal with that all the time from different hotels where they try to do something that they're not supposed to do, and then I have to call, and I have to talk to their managers, and we have to discuss it, and then it stops for a while, then it happens again, and then I call, and it's this never-ending cycle. So to have that in a permit, to me, it's got to either be, yes, you can, or no, you can't. And I honestly do believe that, yeah, you do have to look at the whole picture for transportation, because if you begin it now, you are going to change the transportation of this island for everyone. And you will. It may not happen right away, but trust me, as soon as that happens, every other hotel is going to be in here asking you to amend their permit. Every one of them, I promise. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Discussion.
I'm all for going to the dive park and no botanical gardens personally.
I'm for dive park. That's it.
Two. Dive park.
Dive park.
Move to amend the transportation permit. Move to amend the transportation permit to add the dive park and casino as an additional drop-off area.
I'll second it.
Call for a vote, please.
4 ayes and 1 abstention. Councilmember Morrow.
Okay, item number 7 under general business pertains to lower terrace strengthening and utility protection project public bid. This was discussed at the September 3rd City Council meeting. Staff had recommended the public bid be awarded to Boulder Construction. City Council instructed staff to examine alternative measures to reduce costs. And so at this point, I'd like to hand it over to Mr. Jayich, who's going to discuss what's transpired since the time of the last meeting and where we stand currently, and offer staff recommendations. So, Mr. Jayich.
Excuse me for a second. I'd like to do one thing, because I wasn't involved in this last. I want to commend the cab company for keeping that area clear, that where they were having their cabs all lined up. They're not there. I've been by there 50 different times, and it's clear all the time. You're doing great. Keep it up.
Now, if the Blue Water would move its vehicle, would be nice. I said if the Blue Water would move its vehicle out of the way, it would be nice.
Thank you.
Don't forget show and tell.
Oh, pictures?
Yeah.
Okay.
Don't forget.
I believe the staff report, you have some pictures of the situation up there. I was directed last city council meeting to try to come up with alternative measures up there. To support the utilities would require a considerable amount of work. We have clearance issues with Department of Health. We can get by them. I made a couple calls today and last week, but they're costly. We could put the sewer inside of a casing, a welded casing, so that if it did leak, it wouldn't contaminate. There's a lot of things that could transpire there. The problem is that Lower Terrace Road's just like sitting on bedrock, and any excavations there to relocate utilities very expensive. And if we did relocate the utilities, we're still not going to address the roadway, which is eroded and is skinny, and plus it slopes the wrong way. Without getting some engineering companies involved and survey and potholing and spending some more money, I really can't recommend a fix at this present time. So a decision is going to have to be made on it as to what you'd like to do. The staff report has some pictures. If you have any questions on that, I'd be happy to answer them. Also some figures that are very rough for just fortifying some utilities in the area. Ben and myself visited the site today. There's a possibility that one of the lines we might be able to get Edison to help us with, since it's theirs. The problem is the saltwater line has broken before, and sewer line has developed some low spots, and it seems like it's moving somewhat. The videos don't show it to be leaking at the present time, which is good, but we can't be sure of any more movement on the roadway if it's not going to start to leak. So we're kind of at a tough situation there. We have to remember that the project at one time, before I was involved, I believe was designed to be a lot larger. It encompassed almost all of Lower Terrace Road. And I believe City Council directed staff at that time to shorten up the design, which we did. And then we were asked to take it to public bid, which we did. If you need some more investigating, we'll probably have to spend some monies with some engineering firms and do some potholing and redesigns of some other nature. I checked with the original designer, Michael Murphy, and he's pretty sure that this is the cheapest way to do it. Again, our low bidder we're quite comfortable with. He's got a good reputation. Did the work up on Middle Terrace Road, same design, and I feel his price is pretty good. So I'd be happy to answer any questions for you.
Anyone in the audience or council have questions for Dennis?
They were, what was it, they're $400,000 under the next bid, is that correct?
About
Roughly?
that, yes. I believe they went all the way up to, I
Yeah.
should have brought those with me, but there was quite a spread.
There was a big
spread.
difference, but they were $400,000 less, right?
Yeah, with all the alternates, it was just under 400.
And the other thing too, on my part of it, it seems the longer we wait for this whole project, anyway, the more expensive it goes up every year. And we know by starting this years ago, we're at now. And I think the longer we keep putting stuff off like this, the more it's going to cost down the line.
And the contract assured us that the contractor assured us that they're not going to increase that price. That's why I voted no, which I'm not going to do this time. I'm going to vote yes.
Actually, the action last time was that staff would try to renegotiate or try to look at re-engineering it, and if they could save 25%, that it would be let out to bid. If not, then the contract as presented to the city last time, which is a $1.3 million contract, would proceed to be entered into. What Mr. Zage is telling you is that, looking at it, they were not able to re-engineer it to save 25% to provide protection for the road and the utilities. And therefore, right now, it is the council's previous action to award the contract to this contractor and to proceed with the project. The only real open issue is, now that we've affirmatively put this on the ROPS, we have maybe up to $1 million which we can spend between January and June. Is the contractor willing to delay the start of this until sometime after January, so that all those funds are covered by the ROPS?
I think we can go ahead and get started and not have to spend those funds. The contractor's willing to work with us on that. The majority of the work will probably be requiring progress payments come January, mid-January. So we should get out there and start. If we're going to start, we should give him a notice to proceed probably within 30 days. And I think that time frame will work with the funding.
Right.
And you'll be able to adequately protect the work during the anticipated flood of rains.
Yeah, right.
That are going to be coming.
Yeah, the contractor's well aware. We made the BMPs and all of that very clear to him. And we can have some more discussions with him should you direct us to enter into a contract with him. So the contractor's ready, willing, and able to go, so it's just entirely up to your decision. Yes, sir.
So if I'm understanding this correctly, Scott, we've already given him authorization to go with the lowest bidder based on our decision at the last council meeting because he was not able to save more than 25%.
Correct.
Yeah.
So that's my motion.
So we want to have a
Second.
unanimous vote on this one.
Yeah, second.
We have a motion and a second call for a vote.
Public comment?
Oh,
No, Kevin?
I just want to make a comment. As I told you today, if we're going to fix something, we fix it. We just don't keep putting patches and patches and spending money to patch something. If we're going to fix it, let's fix it.
Just
All eyes.
$300,000.
Congratulations, gentlemen.
There you go.
While I'm here, if I can take a little more time of yours, I don't think we got it on the agenda, but if you'll remember...
This is a public comment. We're reopening public comment.
Yeah, let's reopen public comment.
Yeah.
I just want you to spend some more money is all. We have an
You're
issue.
getting good at that.
I know, almost as good as Jennifer, huh?
She's cute.
We have an issue on Pebbly Beach Road, the sewer gravity main. I was fortunate enough to take the new city manager over there and brief him on that situation as well. Last city council, you authorized me to get some informal bids on the issue. It's something that needs to be repaired. Our gravity main sewer is in pretty bad shape there. And as I said at that point in time, it's due to neglect, frankly, of the manholes that were covered. So it's really unfortunate. But it's got to be fixed. I solicited 5 bids last week, informal bids on the project. We drew up contract documents, specifications, the whole schmear, and we received 3 bids. Our staff estimate was $350. Engineer's estimate, believe it or not, from RBF was $200,000. We knew that was low, so we kicked it up. We got 3 bids back. The local contractor, Jordahl, is the lowest. He's at $322. The next gentleman was G.B. Cook, a licensed A contractor in the island, very good reputation. He's real close to him, within a couple $1,000s, but he had a few exclusions, and he excluded bond and a bunch of other prerequisites. And then we had the gentleman that's familiar with the island, Kolich. He's pretty busy, but he came in at $671,000.
Yeah.
So this is something that really needs to be done, gentlemen and ladies. I need you to think about it. Our recommendation is to go with the local contractor, Jordahl. I've met with him a couple times, quite comfortable that he can handle it. He's got the facilities here, and I think the longer we wait down there could really hurt us. So we need to give it some good thought. And I'm sorry to be hitting you with all this money. It's something we need to do. So with that, if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. Otherwise, I guess this should have come up.
Well, I
prior.
guess the motion at the last meeting was to go to informal bid and to award the contract, and then we're going to come back at the next meeting for ratification of that actual amount. So you already made the motion to go out to bid and to award the contract to get this done as quickly as possible. We'll come back at the next meeting with the formal ratification of that previous action.
Okay.
Can we do it now?
No.
No, because not on the
Not
agenda.
You could, but we all go to jail.
No, okay.
Thank you, Dennis.
You're welcome.
That photograph of the cracked pipe's really enlightening. How much of it's cracked like that, Dennis? If you don't mind me asking.
Pardon me?
How much of that pipe is cracked like that?
It's hard to put a percentage on it, Mayor. I'd say 40, 45. One of the problems is that we weren't able to video the last 300 feet. It's it has sunk as well, and our camera is just underwater. We couldn't get pictures of it. But from what I saw, there's some actual holes, and then you may have seen, well, you see the pictures. That longitudinal crack is reflective continually all the way down the line. It's pretty bad. That pipe should have never been laid in this situation. It's a real skinny pipe, and it's got 10 feet of cover on it at the end. It's just ridiculous.
Luckily, the crack's
Too
on
bad.
top.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, good thing, right? Okay, thank you, Dennis.
Are we still into this phase of changing the subject and doing some other things? Because there's one more thing I'd like to talk to Dennis, since we're doing something.
Well, you can't actually take direction on it, but we'll...
It's just a quickie, just to let everybody know.
You can ask him a question.
Mike Flynn just announced that they're starting to build that museum. And I went over to complain about the noise. I thought I'd start him out right anyway, since I live across the street. And he told me that there's a...
Hey, Ralph?
Yeah.
I've got an idea.
What?
Why don't you go up there, because public comment is still open, and you can give us public comment.
Oh, okay, I can do that. Simple stuff. Public comment. Mike indicated to me that they have to go up on the upper road and dig in there and connect up to the saltwater system. And they've looked at it, and they said that the infrastructure on that upper road needs to be replaced. And I asked him to get a hold of Dennis and try to see if they can save the city some money, since he's going to have all his machines up there and he's going to be digging. If at the same time they can replace the infrastructure on that road, that'll be one less road we have to change. And since he already has all the equipment up there, it might make sense for us to do it. He indicated it would probably be about a $30,000 price. So something to think about. Got it, Dennis?
Dennis, can you comment on that? Thank you, Ralph.
Mike has discussed that with me. I didn't know it was an issue tonight. And I don't know the magnitude of that line, Ralph. I'm sorry.
I just wanted to make it, I was supposed to talk to you outside the meeting, but since I saw you here.
Yeah, I thought he was going to discuss it before he left, and I guess he forgot.
Yeah.
But there's an existing water line up there that's not stable. And Mike's going to be digging on this side for his excavation of the museum. So responsibility of that line is something that you all would have to decide, the city line. and I need to get into it with Mike to see the quantities so I can verify the pricing. One point in time, I thought he had said it was going to be relatively smaller, but he might have found a larger area. And so let me get into it with him. I think what we should do is probably put it on the agenda for the next meeting, and we'll have some historical value. Okay?
Okay. Thank you,
Sorry,
Dennis.
you only have
Thanks. Thanks, Ruth.
one item limit.
You need me again?
No.
Okay. Also on our agenda this evening is the budget to pass for this fiscal 2013-2014. With Ben's arrival on the island, I think it's probably more appropriate for him to spend a moment or two and go through the budget and dot the i's and cross the t's and do what you can to be a little bit more comfortable with it.
You do mean more than a moment, right?
Well, a moment. I think it's also probably fairly relevant for us to have a real hand around our anticipated revenues that I think Gina is working on. So I think that we maybe need to give her whatever resources we need to give her to get that in there, rather than using 2010 revenue numbers and 2013 expenses. You know, let's make them kind of have some parity. And then that way, when this thing comes before us, whether it is a healthy budget or one that's not so healthy, it gives us gives you the opportunity and staff the opportunity to come up with a handful of options as to how we're going to try to make it balanced in whatever time frame staff recommends it's appropriate. So if council doesn't mind it coming off the agenda tonight and letting staff kind of work on it some more, would be all right.
Are you trying to say hold it over?
Yep.
I just want to make sure.
But there's actually some rationale to hold it over.
And also, Ben,
Despite others.
Me and Ben have talked about it. I'd like to see if we can't get this on the website, city website, if we can. I know it's going to take somebody a while to do that, but I'd like to see it on the website.
Absolutely, the goal would be, once we've got it in shape and it's finalized, that we would publish it. We would appreciate very much the opportunity to spend a little more time to make sure the numbers are solid, and then come back with some recommendations as to how to address the challenges we're going to face. So thank you, we appreciate that.
Awesome, thank you, Ben.
Any member from the public want to comment on this? Nope.
Anyone
Good.
care to comment on our budget item? It's a pretty good idea, Kevin, huh?
I'd like to add, I want to thank Gina for spending 4 hours with me yesterday on this thing.
I think she deserves an award.
Spending that much time. Yesterday was Sunday, too, by the way.
Awesome. Okay. We closed session. We have a couple of closed session items this evening. So why don't we jump into city manager reports and attorney reports now, so that folks in the audience can go home and Tony can go to bed. Do you have anything, Ben?
No, I just want to thank the council and thank city staff and thank the community for having me. It's been real exciting first day, exhausting, but all in a good way, and just look forward to being your city manager. Thank you.
City attorney.
The legislation to give Coastal Commission power to enact fines was vetoed by the governor.
Oh, good.
All right. He didn't fold.
Correct.
That's amazing. Council.
I'm fine.
I have an announcement.
No announcements.
Last Tuesday, Holly had her twins.
Oh, nice.
Congratulations.
11:02 was the first one, Sophia Faith, and 11:03 was the second one, Poppy Beth. 6 pounds, 13 ounces for one, 6 pounds, 3 ounces for the other, 13 pounds of babies. They went home from the hospital on Saturday. I expect to see my wife sometime next weekend.
Hopefully.
I haven't seen her yet.
Congratulations, Ole.
Thank you, sir.
Mm-hmm. That's going to be a lot of car seats in one car.
Ooh, they don't fit in an Escape, thank God.
Yes. All right. Anything, Michael?
I have an item. When is the Blue Water going to fix the sidewalk in front of their establishment?
We have provided them with approved plans.
Last week, so it's up to the contractor, we're trying to shove them along.
We asked them to consider delaying the July 4th.
That would be nice.
Richard, anything?
I'm good.
Okay, closed session?
Yeah, 2 closed session items, 1 conference with real property negotiators regarding the Grand Prix race, which includes the Hour Trail and, going to amend this a little bit, Dove Canyon. And the agency negotiators are Ben Harvey, the city manager, and myself, city attorney, negotiating party, Santa Catalina Island Company, and I'm going to add the Conservancy under negotiation, price and terms of payment. For the Island Company portion of this, we will have abstains by Councilmember Hernandez, and has it been a year?
Let's see, this is the 15th.
16.
I think it's been a year. I think that's when I sold the company a year ago.
All right.
I should be okay.
Then only Councilmember Hernandez, and then we also have public employee evaluation, title city manager. We're going to see how Ben's done in his first 12 hours.
Well, his first council meeting's 3 hours long.
Fantastic.
Thank you. It'll be 11 o'clock.
I'm shooting for that 5:30.
Okay, we've returned from closed session. Scott?
No reportable action taken in closed session.
Okay, this meeting's adjourned.
Good night, Tony.
Good night, Tony.
Good night, Tony.
All right.